go ahead and I will call the meeting to order at 1:02. Roll call, please. Here.
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 Here. Here.
And so we have a quorum. All right, everyone got the minutes? Any questions or comments on the minutes? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to pass.
Bill, and seconded by
Comments, I guess.
yeah,
The first page, the last, let's see, review of chapter 72, the second paragraph there, remember Fitzsimmons discussed. At the very end, it says trees may be cost effective and make the goal village forever. And it was made a little clearer later on in the minutes. What I was saying was in lieu of the tree bag.
Okay, so we'll make that amendment. And then Jack?
No.
Nope. Okay. All right. So the motion, I guess, would be to make that, approve the minutes with that amendment. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. And here comes Alex. Hey, Alex. All right, approval. This was not on the agenda, but I did talk to Ginger about bringing this up. At the last meeting, we talked about having a subcommittee. So in my mind, what's happening is these meetings, we're getting into the nitty gritty, and then this subcommittee is going to explore those sort of big picture. Are there incentives? Could we set up a separate fund? Is there a conservation impact fee? Those ideas. And so Ginger, Chris, if you want to speak to that. And then Chris had shared with me how a motion would go in order. We have to authorize that subcommittee.
My comment on that is the subcommittee would act much like this committee. Staff would take minutes. So from our perspective, the subcommittee meeting is just like having this meeting. So just for consideration, if you're talking about a subcommittee meeting that met on some other frequencies, at least until the middle of April, staff is pretty tight on ability to staff that meeting. Our budget is due in mid-April, and it's all sometime between now. So just a consideration. It doesn't mean we can't do it. It would just be, I would ask you to think about how often that might be, or maybe it's a one-time thing. I don't know, but there are staffing considerations.
No, and I explained to Carrie as well. That's I know the initial conversation had been around this. It could be done over Zoom or something like that, but the state really wants meetings with government boards to be in person. They made some waivers of that during COVID, but those have all expired. So a quorum would have to meet in person. And essentially the motion, if one is made to have the subcommittee, would have, how many members it has, what their general authority is, what quorum is, if it's anything other than 50% plus one, and the rest can be determined by that board once it's established.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to form this subcommittee. Wendy seconded. Okay, and so how many, are there others who would like to participate? Maybe we start there on determining, authorizing the members. Bob, of course, Wendy, Jessica. Jessica, go ahead.
Can we repeat the exact scope of the subcommittee?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Yes, so it's to have the opportunity to go deeper into what Bob had proposed that last meeting about could you have a flat fee? And secondly, Tyler also had come up with, could you have a conservation impact fee? So rather than doing this one-off here and there, could you just have an overarching, regulation that they try to meet? And this is fact finding, and they will come back with the information and present it to this group to deliberate.
So this committee, this subcommittee is limited to the work we're doing right now on the tree ordinance? Or is this a subcommittee that's going to evolve and then the next subject that we study and we find some, I mean,
What's its limitations?
yeah.
I was saying it as trees. We keep it to trees. That would be our purview. Everyone's not, Jessica?
Another question, kind of to Ginger's point on its staff and everything like that, is the intent that this committee, you said, is fact finding, so the members are going to come with information on the approach and discuss it? Then I just don't want to give county staff more work for the subcommittee than the general board.
Sure. Yeah, certainly want to be cognizant of their time. Yes, I think we should be a working subcommittee that pulls together numbers. Bob already ran some in his head. Hopefully we don't have to ask much from staff to provide. So any other discussion or questions? So I'll go back to if you would you like to participate? And then that will authorize the number of members. Bob did, Wendy, Jessica, 3. I would like to participate, that'd be 4. Alex, 5.
As much as I'd like to, I don't think I'll have time to.
Understood.
Remember.
All right, so that's 5 members. So the motion would be for a 5-member subcommittee with the authority as stated. And the quorum would be 50% plus 1, which is 3. And we would meet in person. And just from a logistics standpoint, we'll have to wait till mid-April in order to utilize staff time.
Okay, so I hope that doesn't mean we're going to wait till April to get through this ordinance?
No. So these meetings, we will continue to do our work. And this subcommittee is just kind of high in the sky, contemplating these other bigger, changes. But no, today we're going through this. We're rolling our sleeves up and we're going to keep going through this until we're done.
I think the way that I'm seeing this, and if I'm understanding what Carrie's saying correctly, is we have some incremental changes that were proposed to the existing code through a lot of effort by staff. And we've all put a lot of effort into shredding those and making other suggestions and all kinds of things. That doesn't mean that the original suggested changes don't have incremental value for us now. What we're looking at is long-term, we think there might be better ways for us to set up this section of the code to more effectively achieve our goals and maybe at a little lower expense in the overall process. And those things are too long-term for us to be able to act on without further review. And so I have some comments to, feed towards the subcommittee's,
Sure.
Goals later. But at the end of it, I see that as we really need to take action on what's prepared and in front of us.
Sure.
As yes or no, and then some of the bigger things explore for future discussion.
Yes, exactly. So, all right, so a 5-member committee relegated to that authority. Quorum is 3. We'll plan to meet sometime after April. And I think that's all that had to be in the motion. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Great. All right, continued review of Chapter 72 Tree Ordinance. Let's see where we left off. Ginger?
If you wouldn't mind, I have a couple of other things that I just wanted to throw out there real quick, which I would do at the end, but we don't know what the end might look like. So the meeting calendar, Brianna sent out, well, and here's another point. Brianna sent out in January a list of all of the meeting dates for the year, which is basically this first Wednesday of every month. If anybody had any particular conflicts, please let us know. One in particular we wanted to bring up is one of the meetings is July 5th. And I didn't know if, people might be out of town or whatever for the long holiday or something. So I just wanted to throw that out there that we do have a meeting calendar, but we can move things around as people need to. And then my second point on that is I have heard from at least one member that they're not getting all of the emails. And so if you didn't get the email from Brianna on January 17th with the calendar, let me know. I sent out an email about a low impact development meeting that is occurring tomorrow and asked if anyone was interested in that. I have heard back that not everyone on this group actually received that email from me. But I know some of you did because you replied and some didn't. So I don't know if it's a glitch in our system. I'll certainly check to make sure that I have the right email addresses, but you get some emails from me.
I didn't get that.
But you didn't get that one, so I don't know. So just FYI, there's some kind of email glitch that we're going to try to figure out, but keep in mind that if, and I think last time there was a question about some people maybe didn't get the minutes, so I don't know what's going on with our email system. Yeah.
Just, the minutes did just come out now, right?
Yes.
I had not missed it.
You did not miss
Okay.
it, no.
Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. Because I actually thought Bree sent them out earlier, but that was just us emailing them back and forth. And anyway. And then about this meeting tomorrow. So if anybody doesn't know, there is a low impact development meeting tomorrow. It is the beginning of the grant that we talked about. It's from 9 to noon tomorrow at the Lyonia Environmental Center. And it's intended to discuss the potential barriers to implementation of LID, right? So it's for practitioners to share with our grant team what they've experienced or what they perceive as barriers to low impact development so that the grant team can then take those ideas and experiences and try to find ways around those barriers. So anybody that has anything to share, we would love to hear it. If you didn't know about the meeting and now you suddenly think you want to go, let me know. Because I will not be at the meeting, unfortunately. I had intended to late addition to my calendar, and Clay as well. So Keith will be there, Katrina will be there. We'll have plenty of county staff, but Clay and I will both not be there. So there are a couple of seats open if you want to go and didn't already register. And because you are a committee, we had to notice that meeting, tomorrow's meeting, as if it was an ENRAC meeting. I would just say, and Chris, you let me know if I say anything wrong. There are going to be breakout sessions as part of this meeting. We have endeavored to make sure that no two ENRAC members are at any one table so that you can speak freely at your table because we have to take minutes because it's an ENRAC meeting. But we can't take minutes at 9 different breakout sessions, right? So we're trying our best to keep ENRAC members separate in the thing. So just if you're at the meeting tomorrow, really be cognizant of the sunshine rules about talking to one of your fellow committee members. Obviously, things said to the whole group, will be recorded and all of that. So anything?
No, I think you covered it. I appreciate that.
Sarah Lee, and then I'll go to you, Melissa. Go ahead.
Is just a question, is the public allowed to attend this, to listen, or is this a closed meeting?
The public is permitted to attend, but it is RSVP because it's a confined space. So yes, the public can come. There's no limit on who you can be to come, but you do have to register.
It's kind of too late at this
It's kind of
point,
late. It's
isn't it?
tomorrow, yeah.
Okay.
I think we'll just have a handwritten name tag is all. Melissa?
I'm just curious to know, show of hands, how many people are intending to go in a,
Oh.
Okay, so here's what I would ask of you, and I will share this with Katrina because they took who was registered and they put them at different tables. So if you are an NRAC committee member and you weren't registered before, 10 minutes ago, when you get there, will you please let someone know that you are an NRAC member so they can shuffle if they need to, so that we can try to avoid sunshine.
Jessica?
Do we know what time the breakouts are? Because I might be able to help. We have Volusia Forever at 9, and so I won't be over there till like 10:30 probably. So if
Sure, we do know what time. I don't know. Let me look.
I say I registered, but if it's in the morning, Tyler can have wherever table I was because I probably won't be there. No, go early.
I'll be there on Thursday. Space at
Me too, yeah. Okay, while Ginger looks that up, let's get oriented on where we're at. I believe we are, I don't want to say it on that first, the page 3, lines 82 and 83 of the, Oh, go ahead, Ginger.
Okay, what? Hold up, you got ahead of me.
I did. Okay. Good. Okay. Hopefully that's not where we're at.
Roundtable exercises start at 9:55 tomorrow. Okay. All right, so back to
Yes, okay.
continuing with chapter 72. Last time we talked, we wanted to have a brief PowerPoint that explains the ordinance from a high level, like easy peasy, here's what it says, and then get back into the language, because we think we can answer a lot of the questions if we explain how it works, and then we go back to the language. So that's what we have ready for you.
Great.
Bob, looks like.
Yes, I just want to put my July 5th absence in my.
Okay. Okay. Am I doing this?
You're in front of the computer.
Okay. All right, so review chapter 72 of the Land Development Code, tree protection. And we sort of wrote this as if we hadn't already had a very long, painful meeting. So it's not intended to be insulting in any way that, most of you get these concepts by now, but just some basics. So some types of property in Volusia County and some activities are exempt from tree permitting. We'll talk about what those are. Another basic, 1 and 2 single-family residential on existing lots is treated completely different than everything else. So existing lots, you're putting a house on it or a townhouse, it's got different standards. So when we're talking about the standards for subdivisions and site plans and whatever, they're different. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then there are really 5 main parts of the tree code. There are, if you're retaining trees on site, you have to protect them from damage during development. We'll talk about all of these a little bit more. If you remove trees on a development site, they have to be replaced in some manner, and there are options for that. A portion of each development has to be set aside for the protection of existing trees. Each lot post-development has to have a minimum number of trees. And then large trees, specimen and historics, are considered special, and they have specific standards. So does that make sense? Really, as we go through this, there are 5 things. You protect stuff from construction damage, you replace trees you remove, you set aside a protection, minimum number of trees, and then if it's historics or specimens, they have special rules.
0.35 main standards do not apply to 0.2.
Well, some don't.
In total, I just want that.
Right. So as we go through, we'll talk about which do and which don't. And that is a source of confusion in the existing code. And so some of the changes that we've made are to minimize that confusion. So we moved some sections around to make it more clear what applies to what kind of development.
I don't know. I need to make a matrix out of this so I can do it.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about exemptions. Here's what we have 2 columns here. What is currently an exemption and what we have shown you as proposed exemptions. So currently residential owner occupied lot. So this is not a vacant lot, right? Go back to this. Number 2 is that's a vacant lot, development of a vacant existing lot. This exemption, residential owner occupied, is what applies to a lot with a house on it that someone lives in, the owner lives in, okay? So those are exempt from tree permitting requirements, including if they have a historic tree. Exempt also is property with agricultural uses, and that also comes with that 3-year rebuttable presumption that we talked about. Trees in certain zoning classifications are exempt. So the ag zoning classifications, conservation, resource corridor, those are exempt from tree permit requirements. If a tree is determined by Volusia County to be deteriorated, and there is a definition for what that means. For the most part, trees in rights-of-way or easements are exempt from permitting. All trees grown or planted for sale, so trees that were grown in a nursery, are exempt. And then nuisance species, we talked about that last time, things like camphor, citrus, and there's a list. Some of the things we've proposed to change is we've talked about, do we eliminate the exemption for historic trees on those single family owner occupied lots or on lots that are zoned ag but aren't a bona fide ag operation? We've talked about increasing that rebuttable presumption timeframe to try to prevent folks from clearing a property in anticipation of development. Currently, the mobile home 4 classification and RA are exempt. We had proposed to remove those and add conservation because right now conservation isn't technically exempt, but it probably should be, much like, so those are the properties that we, land management does stuff on, and it's not currently exempt. We talked about clarifying that there's a 2.5 acre requirement right now. We just tried to clean up that language a little bit. And then adding some other things that by practice have been exempted, like airport protection, because FAA regulations require the airport to remove certain trees, but they're not technically exempt in our ordinance. Same with like DOT road projects. They're not technically exempt, but the DOT does not come to us for a permit to remove trees. Land management activities, and then activities on state or federal land, which again, while they're not technically exempt, those folks do not come and get a tree permit from Volusia County if they do something at the state forest, for instance. And then we propose to remove unclear language about planned rights of way. And so, as we go through the language, you'll see all of those specifically. Any questions on exemptions?
I have a couple. What is RA?
Zoning?
Rural agriculture.
So it's like hobby farm.
Or is it residential agriculture?
Yeah.
Residential.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not commercial agriculture. It's not A1, A2.
So when you say you're proposing to remove a residential agriculture classification, the agriculture is a secondary use to a primary use of an occupied house. So would this only affect historics?
No, this would affect any lot coming in for a tree removal permit on RA. So we've got a lot of lots that are 1 acre in size or 2 acres in size that are RA, and they're technically tree exempt, but they're mainly zoned for residential.
Are
But
they
if
vacant? Are
there's
these?
a house on, if there's a house on it and it's owner occupied, it's exempt from that.
Okay, so this
exemption.
wouldn't affect it. And I'm asking because my zoning is RA.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, it's for new construction.
And then what is why would you add a 2.5 acre ag exemption? What does that mean?
Well, right now, it has like some of them, and when we get to the language, it'll be more clear, right? But some of them say over 2.5 acres. And so it's just really to clear up that language. It's mostly in there now. Can you explain that better?
Right now, the way it's written, it has to be 2.51. It has to be over 2.5 acres. So we would clarify that 2.5 acres or larger.
Or larger, because most lots are
2.5. So they have to go to their surveyor and try to find that 0.0001 to be over 2.5 acres.
Okay.
Is there an exception for an ag operation that's smaller than 2.5 acres?
If you've got a bona fide agricultural use,
Yes.
you're exempt.
Yep. So like we've discovered right here, right? More than one exemption might apply to a property, right? So yes, you might be less, might be 2.5 acres. So the exemption wouldn't apply. But if you're bona fide ag, it doesn't matter how big you are, right? Right. Well, that would remain. If you have a bona fide agricultural assessment with the property appraiser, it's exempt. It doesn't matter what zoning category you're on or how big you are. If you get a bona fide ag assessment, you're exempt.
But we're wanting to take that away in the first.
No. Basically what it says now is lots that are zoned certain things over 2.5 acres are exempt, but the over 2.5 is the problem because most lots are platted at 2.5, right? but another exemption may apply to you, right? So you wouldn't be exempt based on the size requirement, but if you're bona fide ag, you'd still be exempt.
I like this idea, but I would say like 2.47 or something, because there's a lot of those 2.48, 2.49 acres, and I just feel like maybe change this once instead of twice.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, so let's talk about new, we never changed this.
What?
That new 1 and 2 family residential. So new construction on 1 and 2 family residential. So here are the things that do apply and the things that don't apply. Tree protection during development applies. So if you're protecting trees on that site while you're building a house, you are obligated to actually protect the trees through barriers, and you can't park your truck under them, etc. The historic tree requirements apply. The tree removal and replacement requirements apply. It's a little bit different than the way we do it for site plans and subdivisions. We'll talk about that. And then the minimum tree requirement. So the 1 tree per 2,500 square feet of lot area applies. So that's a vacant existing lot, you're building a house on it. What does not apply are the requirements to retain a certain amount of specimen trees, and you don't have to set aside 15% of that lot for tree preservation. Make sense? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so as we talk about each standard, we'll say how it applies to single family residential. And keep in mind, this is new construction. Okay, so tree protection during development. The standards right now say you have to have barricades around trees that you're going to retain. It defines that tree protection zone. It requires that trees be protected from grade changes and from trenching. This is all existing language. And then it protects the root zone of trees. So basically it says you can't pour used oil in the root zone, right? The root zone is protected. Here's sort of a typical tree protection detail that we look for on construction plans. So basically you have to put up this barricade. It's typically an orange mesh fence, and it either has to be at the drip line of the tree or the root zone, which is approximated by 1 foot per inch of tree diameter. So if you have a 12-inch tree, the root zone is a radius of 12 feet around that tree. And then there's also some requirements about trenching. So you can see in that right-hand diagram the difference between cutting a trench through that root zone versus if you did something like directional bore or something like that. So those standards exist now in the ordinance. Last time there was a question about maybe the 1 foot per inch of diameter being too big. And so this is a diagram of sort of that in the blue box on the top is what people think the root zone of trees looks like. And the picture on the bottom is the reality of a tree root zone. The roots are much shallower than most people think and extend a larger distance.
So when we protect that 1 foot, we're already losing probably half of the root zone already.
So what we had proposed for some changes were really just changes in the language for clarity. The only substantive change was right now the ordinance talks about using tree wells to protect trees from grade changes. We have found in the literature supports that tree wells don't really work well over the long term. So we're eliminating that language. It doesn't mean you couldn't propose to do one. If you had an arborist report and they wanted to do that, it still would be allowed. It wouldn't be prohibited, but we're not specifically calling out tree wells as one of the preferred options for tree protection, if that makes sense.
Question for Keith. If we're already losing half of the roots, if we are following the drip line for the circumference, what's the consequence of that over time?
Well, I mean,
Well, so So you have to have a number, right?
You have to
Because,
start somewhere.
and unless you actually excavate the root zone of that particular tree, you don't know exactly where the roots are. So a tree growing where there's an obstruction, maybe the tree's in the middle and this is a sidewalk, it may be sending roots out in the other directions, right? So we don't know. So we use that approximation to say that we've protected most of the roots of that tree, and that tree is likely to survive, assuming that there aren't a lot of other abuses, right? They're not storing their equipment in the tree protection zone, all of those things. There's no way to 100% protect the tree root zone and still really develop any site,
I think my question and half, an explanation. That picture is a tree growing with no competition around it for canopy or roots. Do we have studies on what the root zones of the trees look like in a more dense clustered forest where there is that competition? Is it still the same spread?
It would be a root mat at that point, it would be a mass. And actually trees grow better in that situation because the roots tend to hold each other. When you have trees like this, they tend to blow over.
Well, and so would this have a wider reach maybe as a result of trying to improve? I mean,
with less competition, there could be a wider, root zone.
And I think that adds to the complexity of their job of figuring out it.
Okay, good with that. Move on. Okay, so sort of the second of those 5 standards is tree removal and replacement. So the code says that trees that are removed have to be replaced, and it's based on a calculation of 15% of the cross-sectional area of the tree that's removed. So you can see the diagram there. We looked at this last time. So the diameter at breast height is some number of inches, 12 inches. Well, for this example, it's 15. So the cross-sectional area is this calculation of pi times the radius squared. So you can see for this example, a 15-inch tree is equal to 176 cross-sectional square inches. And our code right now says that for every tree that's removed, you replace 15% of that. So in this case, that tree, you would replace 26 inches. And we'll talk in a minute about replacement. But so basically for all of the trees removed on a site, we do this calculation. Well, the applicant does this calculation, let me say that. We check the math and then we do the calculation.
On residential, we do
We
the
help, yeah.
calculation. On, commercial, Bob does calculation.
So just, or somebody does. So,
Tyler does.
so somebody goes out and does a tree survey of all the protected specimen and historics. And then somebody calculates all the cross-sectional square inches, and then they have to replace, of the ones that they're taking out, they have to replace with 15% of those cross-sectional square inches
That's right.
somewhere.
That's right.
And that 15% can also apply to the minimum number of trees?
Yes.
Okay.
So
What I will point out with this as my challenge, a 15-inch tree requires us to put in 26 and a half square inches of replacement. A small replacement tree is a 2.5-inch diameter tree, so that's a 1.25 times 1.25 times 3.14. That's not a very big number. A big tree is a 4-inch tree. That's 2 times 2 times 3. That's about 12. We are greatly increasing our count number of trees. Almost never have I had enough room to meet this requirement on a site, and so we have to pay into the tree fund, or we propose planting trees too close, and then Keith tells us that they're going to be too close to be healthy. And so I have found every time this code drives us to pay into the tree fund. Just because of the nature of our replacement trees are tiny in comparison. I mean, you can't easily transplant a 12-inch tree.
right.
Well, there is the option currently where you can do 1 tree per 1,000 square feet lot space, and you don't have to pay into the fund. So that is.
Is that in the land
we'll get
development
there.
side or just the lot individual?
That's in the residential.
Residential
Yeah.
only.
And see, all of the permitting that I do is the site sites.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about how you can provide replacement. So there are 3 Ps. You can plant new trees, and you plant trees according to how much replacement you have to do based on your removals. You can protect the existing small trees on the site. So any tree less than 6 inches in diameter, which is not considered protected by our ordinance, if you save that tree, you can use that toward replacement. So if you save a 5-inch tree, that's a good amount of replacement. Now, that doesn't work on every site. You know, sometimes there aren't other trees, there aren't small trees, whatever, but protection of existing small trees on the site counts toward replacement, or you can pay into the tree replacement fund. So, or any combination thereof, right? So you save a couple trees and that gets you so far, and you can plant a couple trees and that gets you so far, and then, you know, maybe you have to pay into the tree replacement fund. Our goal is not to get more money into the tree fund. It's to make sure that trees are being preserved on site. The fewer trees you cut down, the less replacement you have to do. And the more little trees you save, the less replacement you have to do. So that's why it's set up that way. That's not to say there aren't other ways to set it up or there aren't unintended consequences, but that's sort of the theory behind it. The intent is to have people cut down fewer trees because then they have to do less replacement.
The less we cut down and clear and develop, the less land we have to replant in. So it has never mattered the size of area of the site that I've been using. If I have a dense forest, I can't plant in the dense forest. So I'm having to plant where we clear. I've never been able to meet this rule on any of our projects. I still stand by my statement on that. I mean, think about it. You have a forest. The trees are there, we're happy with the density of it. We go cut down an area, we're having to plant numerically double to quadruple the number of trees. They're going to grow up, we're going to have a density that is unacceptably high. If we replanted with that area unused, we were gonna have buildings, pavement, other things that are in conflict with that we have to space the trees around. So really the way that this is written, and it's why at the last meeting I suggested that we look at minimum coverage. With the typical tree survey, we don't survey anything under 6 inches. So we have to send the surveyors back out after we know what we need for replacement to do the natural vegetation that we then have to basically put in a conservation easement over that section of land. We have to prevent the contractor from going in and underbrushing or clearing or doing anything else. We have to prevent the HOA from doing that. And so all of that is the legal mechanism. That's typically stuff that we work with our lawyers on writing the language for. And so all of those are things that create a challenge during development. And it doesn't, if we're paying into the tree fund and we don't have a good use of that tree fund, it doesn't actually accomplish the goal of more trees on the site or a healthier diversity and size range of trees on the site.
Tyler, may I ask, isn't the tree fund, it's not that you have to replace it on the site, but we want to have an equal number of trees from when you began development to when you finished development in this county?
So in the example that I give you here, you're going to have a minimum of 3 trees to replace this one tree.
And I also don't understand that math because it's 15% of the
Based on
total.
cross-sectional area of inches, and we can only plant trees that are younger and don't have very much cross-sectional area of inches. If we did it on height of tree, we're planting a 10-foot tree, we're cutting down a 40-foot tree, that's a lot more comparable than we're planting a 4-square-inch tree and cutting down a 27-square-inch tree. And that's the difference that we run into is, and we have this challenge with multiple agencies. This is the most complicated math I do for tree replacement of any agency, and it is actually not the highest replacement criteria either. So, you know, not meaning to pick on Volusia County, I'm just kind of, the biggest challenge that we have is the replacement criteria applies to the areas that we're working with the site typically. So unless I have a cleared site, I don't have somewhere outside of where I'm working to plant these new trees.
Sure.
So I have a question. So does the money in the tree replacement fund go towards the county tree giveaway that is happening? That's one of the places. Where else does that money go?
So yeah, we just did a tree giveaway, and that goes, you know, that comes from the tree fund. We're just having discussions today about, you know, doing more with that. We also send out grants for planting public areas. You know, we're trying to get more people to apply for those grants. So we're currently working on that now. And we have utilized the money in the past to plant areas and project areas, Glenwood, schools,
Doing a stormwater pond project.
stormwater ponds, all throughout the county.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say that I see projects all the time that don't end up owing anything for replacement. That typically means they had to leave more of the property uncleared. I've got a slide in here, I believe in here, in the previous meeting, I had a subdivision up there, like 30 to 35% of the property was actually in a tree preservation area. And they actually did that so they wouldn't have to provide replacement, and they ended up with a surplus. So when you end up with only 15% tree preservation areas on the project, yeah, you might end up owing. But if you double that, you're going to have less lots, but you're going to have more tree preservation.
Well, and that's not just tree preservation that you're speaking to. I assume it's natural vegetation retention areas, so you can't clear them and have good walking paths and other things. It's vines and brush and.
Well,
that
this
type of
particular
stuff.
one only had 15% in the NVE, and the other 15% was just tree preservation, and they underbrushed it. So they utilized it as common open space for like dog parks and those types of things. The fewer trees you cut down, the less replacement you have. And as far as this being complicated, it's nothing more complicated than doing it by canopy.
Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, the approach that you're talking about, Keith, absolutely, it works. But one of the things that we've got to balance when we look at development in general is, are we unnecessarily creating urban sprawl? And when we decrease the density of the areas that are currently designated in our future land use map, then we're creating sprawl. We need to focus on getting to those maximum densities that are already in our future land use, map, inexpensively as possible, because that serves us all in the long run.
Maybe we need to go up instead of out.
Well, I don't disagree.
Alex?
One thing I just want to mention about the replacement rate on, say, 15-inch tree example, having to replace it with 4 young ones. Well, yes, we are potentially increasing the number of trees we get on that site post-condition. Some trees may die or what have you. It's potentially increasing. The value of the younger tree, the 2-inch tree or 4-inch tree that you plant, is much less than the 15-inch established canopy. Tons of species or birds or squirrels or whatever live in the habitat or in the canopy, and shade coverage and things like that allow for that ecosystem service of the 15-inch tree that your replacement rate of 4 is just simply not providing. So it's not discounting the 4, and definitely. I'm just pointing out the challenge that comes from it.
Very good.
Okay.
Ginger?
Also.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna ask why we use the cross-sectional square inch formula versus just DBH versus DBH. Got a 15-inch DBH, why don't you put in 3 5-inch DBH or something? It just seems simple going through all this.
I'd have to do the math on that, but I know for like a 4-inch caliber tree, you get 12.56 cross-sectional square inches. So instead of a 4-inch tree, you 4 inches of DBH, you get 12.56. So I would have to look at the math and figure out which way, does it equal out or does it?
I see their frustration as a developer. I mean, you're comparing really apples to apples, and you're looking at, you could look at it.
It might equal out. It might equal out.
Yeah, of course, we weren't here when the original tree ordinance was written to know exactly what.
That was some professor at university.
But,
I was part of that.
That's Robert's fault. It's Tom's fault.
Every city will have it's 100 DBH.
Is it?
And that's that was going to be one of my examples, is the city of Orlando could actually have a higher replacement rate, and they also have a minimum lot coverage that they define as 1 6-inch tree of DEH per 2,500 square feet of area. And on every, I analyzed 7 of our projects, and 7 out of 7 matches within the prevailing criteria, is just the minimum coverage, which kind of made my point from the last meeting for me that, and that applies to a tree that's saved, whether it's a 15-inch tree or a 3-inch tree, it applied in that, and that minimum coverage meant we cut down on more trees, we had to plant more trees back. If we saved the trees, we saved them, but the math was a hell of a lot easier, we didn't have to go survey all these little things, so.
Cuts down on cost.
Yeah, but it still gives tree conservation and minimum coverage of trees post-development as an overall goal. I really like the land tree code.
Yeah, I get more complaints about that than anything. So I don't know that the public likes it.
Okay.
We can bring it back too and have you guys look at it if that's something you want to do. Or I'm sure it's on MuniCode, which is one of the one of the resources, so you can look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, there are probably certainly ways that the math is easier. The trick is, are we meeting the goal? And that's where we need your input, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Okay.
Ginger.
Other tree removal and replacement requirements. We talked a little bit about this. Clearing lots as part of the subdivision is limited to 20% of the lots within 1 calendar year. There's a waiver provision. They can go to the DRC and request a waiver. And then it allows for a separate process for single-family lot clearing. So this is where we said tree removal and replacement applies to single-family new construction, but it's a little bit different, and here's how. And hopefully you can see that. And we talked a little bit about this last time. So for a single-family lot, an existing lot, you are required to only replace trees that are removed within the zoning setback areas, right? It's presumed that the buildable area of the lot, you're going to have to remove those trees to build your house and your septic tank or whatever. So you can see on this diagram that the dashed lines represent the zoning setbacks. So the front yard, side yard, rear yard setbacks. Trees within those setbacks are protected, and if you remove them, they have to be replaced. But all the trees in the center don't have to be replaced if you remove them. Now, this example shows the little red X's on all the trees that are coming out, and you can see that on the sort of bottom side of that drawing, or in the front where the driveway is going to be, a lot of those trees in the setbacks are slated to be removed. So replacement is required. But then if you look up at the top, above that red line that's drawn in, they're protecting some of the trees in that buildable area. Those count as replacement because they weren't protected, but they volunteered to protect them. So all of those X's are offset by the fact that they have saved some trees in the buildable area. So the replacement for that is met.
What is the thought process for a different standard for this versus what we were talking about before? Why do it differently?
So there are a lot of lots that are already created in the county, right? These are lots that maybe didn't go through a subdivision process because they were created before we had subdivision rules. They're already vested lots. So if you applied all the tree requirements, so that lot, let's say that lot is 10,000 square feet, they'd have to set aside 15% for tree preservation. If they had specimen trees, they'd have to save them. It would render many existing lots very difficult to develop because the costs for the tree replacement or the avoidance you would have to do to meet specimen requirements would mean that you couldn't actually put a house on it. And so for existing lots, that's why there's sort of this different requirement. Now, newly created lots that go through the required subdivision process are a little bit different. There's a couple of options, and Keith, want to explain what some of the options are. We can deal with the trees as part of the subdivision, or they can choose to deal with the trees individually, like this.
Right. So, I mean, it's incentive to not clear the entire subdivision because when you clear it this way, right, you can save protected size trees in the buildable area that count towards your replacement. So we get more mature trees saved in this manner. We've had several projects lately that have come in. Bob's got one that he's just putting the infrastructure in, and he's going to come in individually and clear the lots. So that's the incentive, is you don't have to provide all that replacement up front. You can do it on an individual basis and save trees and save costs.
And that model does not work on a larger scale.
No, because you're clearing everything, you got to provide replacement. It's not set up in the same manner.
Okay.
Language.
Bill?
And this is only for 1 and 2 lots, existing lots. This is one of the differences that we were talking about.
This is, you have a lot, you come in for a residential building permit.
Gotcha.
And you can come in for a subdivision, put in the infrastructure, and then come in and get a permit to clear each individual lot and do it this way.
Okay.
Bob, so I have seen just remotely some of the things you've been dealing with on the trees on that project that you had. Did that turn out well? Is that like this?
If you're talking about Heavener Acres out there on Grand Avenue, we're making good headway there. The 15% that we set aside fortunately had a lot of trees in it. And so we're coming pretty close, to taking care of that. My comment on what's going on up there, and I think that was one of the houses I built last year out there.
I think it was. It might have been intentional.
Pardon?
It might have been intentional.
Very good. The unfair part about that, and we were able to save those trees outside inside that buildable area, which meant all the larger trees we got credit for. But had we had to take all those trees out and have anything, we would not have had enough space to put in the necessary replacement stock required, and we would have had to pay into a fund. So that's kind of where, to me, it becomes a little inequitable that, this lot, the homeowner may end up having to spend $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 more than the guy that's right next door, just because of where the trees laid out on the property. That's the inequity that I find in the way we approach it.
Well, then I just want to explain that they could choose the second option, which is the 1 per 1,000.
However, you cannot put that many trees on a lot. So you're back to the same scenario where if I can only get 5 of those trees on the lot and offer them adequate space, then I'm going to have to pay into the tree fund for the other 5.
And I think that we'll get to this language, we'll be able to deliberate more, but it does sound like fundamentally there's just a disagreement about the value of the tree you're removing. So Alex's point, and how do you value it? Rather than a 1-to-1, some people are saying that 1-to-1 is not equivalent. But I think we'll dive into that. We'll deliberate a little further once we get there. Go ahead, Ginger.
So that's the caveat about, yes, it applies to single family, but it's a little bit. So here are some of the things that we had proposed to change. And if there's a little question mark after it, it was one of those where we called out, hey, do we want to do this, right? Not that the staff had actually come up with a recommendation, but one of the things we talked about is if the developer wants to clear all of the lots in the subdivision, right? So right now, 20% is the maximum that you can clear in any 1 year. If the developer, for whatever reason, because of the topography, whatever, wants to clear all the lots, should there be additional tree replacement or some other additional requirement, right? That's a question to ask ourselves. One thing that we talked about, the ordinance already says that you have to replace trees with like trees. So if you remove a hardwood tree, you need to replace it with a hardwood tree. But then there was also this complicated section about this ratio of a palm for a non-palm. We're proposing to remove that so that you can use palms as tree replacement for palms that are removed, but not for oak trees that are removed, right? So that's a change that was proposed. We proposed to lower the minimum replacement size to 1.5 caliper. And that caliper is a little bit different measurement than DBH, right? And that's how a lot of trees come from the nursery. So this is really just to have the code fit with sort of the nursery standards. Oh.
So can you describe that? So I thought that the CSSI, when you're talking about replacing that's cross-sectional square inches, replacing that old example where we had, what did we have to do,
This one?
27 inches?
This one?
Or it's 27? Yeah,
This is just updating the minimum tree size requirement. Minimum tree under the code is 6 feet high, 2-inch caliber, right? So you'll have better survivability if you plant 1.5-inch trees. They're more likely 15-gallon. It's going to be cheaper. So this is going to help people out who have minimum standard lots where you've got to plant 5 trees on the lot to meet your minimum standards. It's cheaper to plant 1.5-inch caliber trees than 2-inch caliber trees. They're easier to plant. You get better survivability. But the bad thing about it is you're going to get fewer cross-sectional square inches of replacement in a 1.5-inch caliber tree than you are in a 2-inch caliber tree.
okay,
Right.
I see.
It's not saying you can only plant those. You can plant.
You're reducing.
larger, but
Gotcha.
It just lowers that.
And a lot of nursery trees are more like 1.5 at 6 feet tall. So
Gotcha.
there was sort of a disjointedness about those two. And then we proposed to add some clarification about the use of existing trees as replacement. That hasn't been super clear in the language. We want to make that very clear. Those 3 Ps, plant, preserve, pay, right? Add the language that the replacement trees must remain in perpetuity. We do have a certain standard, but we go back out and check on site plans. Not forever, but a certain number of years. And then throughout, just sort of adding some clarifications and removing inconsistencies in the language. So some of the changes you saw as strike through were really just that kind of stuff, making it more clear. Good. Okay, so the third of the 5 things is the tree preservation area. So the code says now that 15% of the square footage of any development, not those single family existing lots, shall be designated for the protection of trees. And so this is a diagram we showed last time. So in this case, you can see the 15% equals about 17,000 square feet of this commercial site, and we've highlighted that in yellow. So that's how this particular development preserves the 15%. We're all clear on that guy, right?
So I've got one question.
Okay.
I mean, that doesn't show you how wide those areas are in development. But are we putting trees in the wrong place? I guess is my question. Because you can put them in between asphalt like that, and then, they're going to grow so far, and then they're going to start busting asphalt and all
Right.
that. So
That's a great
how
question.
does that come into play when you?
So this is different.
Centered on the right-of-way line, the other half of this green zone is covered by concrete, because that's a concrete crushing yard that's on the bottom of that property line.
But this is a little different because what we're talking about is 15% of the site for the preservation of existing trees. So this isn't necessarily where you're planting trees. This is like, these areas are treed and you're going to preserve those areas. The parking lot islands and that kind of stuff, that's part of the landscape code. And point well taken, right? You right plant, right place kind of situation.
So this is my site plan. This project never built because the trees were too expensive in the back end.
No,
Or
it's built.
it's, the original developer sold the,
It's
did it get built as this?
Yeah. This is Pete's, it's actually Pete's on project.
Okay.
After you dropped it, Pete picked it up, and Pete developed this.
Is it the same layout?
It's about 30 feet in width, 25 to 30 feet on most of the yellow area. It's a little bit larger in the front. And they didn't even include all of the landscape areas that they had on the site. You can go to the next.
Yeah.
Okay, we are an hour in, we're on 3, and I see 2 comments up. Do you still want clarification, or are you good on that,
Clarify
Tyler?
this, or- Okay.
Okay,
All right.
Sarah Lee?
Is there a minimum, minimum square footage for what constitutes a tree preservation area?
The code says that it should be large enough to basically allow for root and canopy development. There's not a foot requirement in the code.
We are proposing.
We are proposing one, a minimum.
So right now, it's a subjective measure.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to argue that, 5 feet isn't large enough, or 10 feet isn't large enough for root and canopy development of a live oak. And I'm pretty sure I can make that argument, and I typically do. So minimum is what we're trying to require is 30 feet. Now, again, if there's something where they can come in and talk with the DRC and appeal that decision, and they could get it lowered. So there's room.
All right, so
Okay.
on this one though, right, you've got these strips, right? 25 feet, which isn't very wide. And then you're going to have some change of grade probably associated with a stormwater pond.
There's no change of grade in the yellow.
I understand there's none in the yellow, but I'm thinking about the roots.
Right next to it, right?
Okay, and I'm looking at this stormwater pond, and so, we have this, hey, I've got 15% of my area. Is there anything in the code that actually protects the survivability of the trees in the preservation area? Because just looking at this with where the retention area is,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if we get into those areas where you've got a large tree there on the edge, we would consider it removed. And they would provide replacement for those trees, but the lot needs retention. It's gotta go somewhere. The tree preservation is going to protect as many trees as possible, but yeah, you're still going to lose some on the edge. And we account for that with the replacement calculations.
Okay. Jessica?
Yeah, I think my question was in the same vein on if it is a historic tree or a large tree exists and we have the drip line protection, right? So we treat it as dead if it's within a certain distance, we have to replant. Isn't that, not incentivizing, but isn't that saying we're going to treat it as dead, you might as well rip it out and plant younger trees? Don't we want to find a way to keep those trees in a way that protects them, but also doesn't deem them dead if there's an encroachment?
Well, sometimes we have developers and engineers work with arborists to come up with root zone protection plans, and they'll come in and do root pruning. We showed the slide of directional boring. There are also some things that do with mulching and micronutrient injections and some other growth inhibitors and things like that we have utilized in the past to try to mitigate those impacts to keep a really large tree. So yeah, we've tried to work with people as much as possible to keep the historic trees, but
So to use those alternative approaches, is it like a DRC waiver for a specific site, or what is that?
If it's going to trip like specimen tree requirements, then yes, it would. If there's an argument basically, and I'm saying, no, there's nothing you can do, that we're considering this tree removed, they can appeal that decision, and the DRC has sometimes overturned my decision.
Okay. Bill?
And then can there be any use of these areas at all for parks, or can you put a picnic table or underbrush or maintain it in any way?
It depends.
Yeah, it depends. If it's utilized as a natural vegetation retention area, an NVRA, then no, it can't be underbrush because you're utilizing the small trees. That's what that designation is. The NVRA is also keeping the 2 to 5.9 inch DBH trees in that area. If it's just labeled as a tree preservation area and you're not utilizing it for replacement, then yes, it can be underbrush and you can, utilize it as a dog walking area or something like that.
Does that make sense? So if you're counting the little trees in that area as replacement, then you can't go in and underbrush because you're now using those little trees as replacement. But if you're not, then you could underbrush and use it for open space or whatever.
Okay.
Okay, so some potential changes we've talked about. Do we think that it's important or recommended to increase that 15% tree retention area in environmentally sensitive areas? We talked about graduated protection maybe in the NORMA overlay or in the environmental core overlay. We've also proposed a change that if you have a tree preservation area that the developer remove the exotic vegetation in that area to preserve the native vegetation. And then also on subdivisions, we have proposed to require that those tree preservation areas be set aside in separate tracts as part of that subdivision. which means they aren't part of someone's lot. They're not the rear 20 feet of a private lot, but they actually be in a tract and they be recorded as part of that subdivision plat. And we've proposed a minimum width for those tree preservation areas. Here is an example.
Oh, I'm sorry, Melissa.
In real world experience, if you, the last point, if you increased the if you required the tree preservation area within a tract in a subdivision to be its own separate area, obviously we think that would result in more trees being saved than if those, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it then designates a responsible entity, right? So tracts are typically the responsibility of a homeowners association. So that, you know, you're just gonna have less fiddling by the private property owner in those tree preservation areas.
I don't want to derail this conversation, but at some point I want to understand how this ever gets enforced.
I'll make a note of that. Okay, Bill, did you have a question? No, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so
Ginger.
here's just an example of that same site plan. If there was a desire to increase the tree preservation area. So the one on the top is what would happen if the tree preservation area was 20% instead of 15%. And so you can see there's the added sort of blue colored areas where maybe the pond, the contours are a little bit different. But you could probably, on this particular example, get to 20%. The bottom is what if it were 25%? And you can see in this case, you wouldn't necessarily get to 25% without some significant changes, at least at that pond area. But just sort of to visualize what do those other percentages look like on a site.
I just want to remind everybody now that per the current code, you can plant at up to 50% of your tree preservation areas. So if there's, you know, you have to remove some trees, you can replant portions of your tree preservation area.
John.
The ski blue areas on the upper right, what is this square footage up there? I can't read it.
948 over here, 1686, and then that top one is 1360 something.
1360
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So.
And that area is already a landscape buffer. Yeah, yeah, that area is already a landscape buffer. They could have just designated it. They just didn't because they didn't need to.
My question is, how could that be a tree preservation area? The area is large enough to sustain a tree.
Especially if we're increasing the minimum width, right?
Right.
So that area in the front, the reason that I didn't show it as a TPA is because I have, I think, 16 water meters banked right there. And so we had to run utilities through it. The areas that are added above the yellow, we could have replanted, but I didn't think anybody would want me to because that's where our storm pipe runs back to the retention pond in the rear. And so we had conflicts with all of these areas that prevented us from being able to do that. I just looked at the aerial. The ultimate development has maybe half the building square footage. They really had to cut this back. So I think maybe the point that I'm trying to communicate is it doesn't really matter what we call the tree preservation area. At 15%, this wasn't an economical development. And so if we increase the requirement, it does not actually change anything in what the outcome on this project was.
Sarah Lee.
Tyler, and you may have said this, but did the owner have a specific threshold? I have to have this many square feet of leasable area, or was the original directive, hey, I'm looking at buying this site, what can I get on it?
I was brought a PUD that identified 5 buildings with specific square footages. I had to meet the requirements of the rezoning that had been approved in conjunction with contractor and what was our client prior to my involvement with the project. Frankly, the fact that that PUD was approved and then it became not economically viable is why our client sold the project. I had a good feeling that it was not anything close to my design that was built because I never got a letter from another engineer saying they took it over and I never did anything else with the project. So the design, it's a UniFirst building now for uniforms and whatever. And they left a lot more on what on this sheet would be the bottom buffer and a lot more in the rear. But this site, the whole center of it, I couldn't walk until Universal drove their ATV rig through to do geotech borings because it was a bamboo forest.
Well, and I think the contention in the community is that you're going at a site with these requirements rather than coming first saying, how do we meet this tree preservation area and build the requirements around these, aspirations. So that, I think that's the conflict going on. Just a reminder, we're not supposed to have sidebar conversations. So I just want to remind you all that. Go ahead. Any other questions or comments? Ginger?
Okay, good. So this was, just one illustration. When we get to the ordinance, we talk about, if we wanted to have graduated protection in these more sensitive areas. This wouldn't have been one of those, but.
Right.
Okay, so the fourth of the 5 basic tenets of the ordinance is minimum tree coverage. And so what the ordinance says right now is that every lot or every parcel is required to have 1 tree per 2,500 square feet of lot area. So here's an example of, this happens to be like a townhome development, a duplex. So 1 tree per 2,500 area, in this case, equals 8.7 trees. We round up, right? So if it's, 8.3, we round up from 3, right? Yeah, we round up. And so here's the drawing that shows how that particular development will meet that minimum standard. Now, all of those minimum standard trees count toward replacement if there is replacement, right? So they all work together. But in this case, they've got, all of the required number of trees to meet that minimum standard.
So.
Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
The 8 trees, what are the 8 trees there? I'm trying to see what.
So the little star-shaped one are magnolias. There are 3 magnolias,
Okay.
1 live oak, and
6 on the bottom.
6 crepe myrtle.
6 crepe myrtles.
Okay,
Now,
so I see
we don't
that.
take grapes
Why in the
anymore.
world would you plant all those front corners of the building, a tree?
well, in that case, those are crepe myrtles,
Those are crepe myrtles.
so they're not
Yeah,
gonna
yeah. Some of these trees that you're planting are not going to be live oaks. Everybody, when you think about these things, you think everybody's like, oh, well, it's going to be this massive live oak tree. There are tons of native trees that are going to be dwarf or semi-dwarf. They're never going to get that large. And those can also be minimum standard trees.
Okay, so I guess my question is that we clarified or classified or want to classify all of these different varieties of trees. And from turkey oaks to red cedar to longleaf pine, et cetera. And you're counting those of what you remove or what you are taking out, but then you're saying you can replace with, landscaping material instead of what
with smaller,
the varieties are?
yes. You don't have to replace the same tree. We have a list of acceptable trees that include all natives. This is actually not the best example because we don't accept crepe myrtles as a replacement anymore.
Good.
But there are small,
Yeah. There's little gem magnolia. It's a semi-dwarf. It's not, we're going to get more than 20 feet taller. Yopon hollies and all types of things that kind of fit that category of the crepe myrtle that you could utilize as a landscape. And they're actually really, really beautiful plants.
I don't know plants, I was just curious.
yeah, this is an older plan because we don't take crepe myrtles anymore.
I don't know if anyone else is hearing it. Is there like a radio playing over there? Maybe we could turn down? Do you hear that? Oh, okay. Can't control it. All right. Go ahead, Ginger.
Okay, so currently in the code, there is an alternate minimum standard for new construction on residential lots. And what it says is, if it's a lot less than 20,000 square feet, and you don't want to do removal and replacement, you can clear the entire lot and replace at a minimum standard of 1 tree per 1,000 square feet. Now, we heard that that's also hard to do, right? So in this case, you would have to put 20 trees on this lot if you wanted to completely clear the lot and not provide removal and replacement. Well, 20 trees is not, well, really isn't going to work here. But you can see in this case, instead of crepe myrtles, Keith substituted Yopon holly. So
Just to show the difference between past and present. And I had to fit those on there, and it's really hard to fit 20 trees on the lot.
And we actually, staff would actually suggest that we remove that 1 tree per 1,000 option. It has been a source of issues since, forever. Because what happens is exactly this: the developer thinks, oh yeah, I'm going to clear it, I'm going to do 1 per 1,000, but then you don't really realize until you get closer to the CO of that lot how many trees you have to plant. And there's no alternative. Once you choose the 1 per 1,000, you have to plant the minimum trees. You can't say, well, I'll plant half of them and put the rest in the tree fund. And so in practice, it doesn't work very well. And so we would.
They don't do that calculation before they choose that?
Well, or they
You've seen
just
that?
They don't visualize what that means. All right, yeah, cool, I'll plant those 10 trees or those 15 trees, but then they go to do it and well, there's not, I've got my septic tank drain field and I got this and that, and then.
If you want to keep that option, I would recommend, if it's really something that you want, going up to like maybe 1 per 1,500 square feet, and then putting some requirements in there for a tree survey. That way, if they decide to go back on it, we have a tree survey to fall back on to charge them for replacement.
Yeah.
So that's an option. We're just giving you guys.
Well, what is the reasoning to have it different per square footage? And maybe you all do the development. Why is it a different standard?
Just a higher density of planting, and that way you don't have to provide replacement.
But why it exists in the first place where.
You don't know?
We don't
Okay,
know.
okay. All right, interesting.
I mean, there are some lots, I guess, that it's been more problematic than helpful, at least in our.
You have to have a fairly large lot and fairly small house.
Yeah.
So some of the larger lots in, some of the larger lots in Daytona Park Estates have utilized this and have been completely fine. But you're talking about they're like 100 by 125 or something like that. There's corner lots typically, and they'll work out, but on your normal lot, it's just too much. And then they sell
the problem at the end.
Yeah,
right?
and then they sell the lot, the developer sells the lot, or the builder sells the lot, someone buys it, they go, there's too many trees on this lot, and they start snatching them out, and then they've got a violation, so.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
Mhm.
How long do they have to stay there for before it's a violation?
2 years, and Bob had asked last time, what was our failure rate, and I looked that up. It used to be in the 20 percentile range. It's now in the 13 percentile range because we created these little tags, and now we tie them to the trees after we do the final, letting the new homeowner know that they have a responsibility. With a date on them.
Yeah.
So since we've been doing that over the past few years, we've almost dropped the failure rate in half.
Great.
Nice change.
Great.
Okay, so a couple of the potential changes. Yeah, because the homeowner, of course, didn't know, right? They move in and they're like, oh, I don't want all this. And then you
Sure.
come back in 2 years and now they have a violation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, my client, project lived in Port Orange, and he had that tree cut down in the city, and went out to find it.
Okay, so a couple of potential changes here. We had proposed to allow the county forester to waive the minimum tree requirements based on site conditions. Now, in some of the other of the 5 basic tenants, there is some language that says, based on site conditions, the county forester could waive this. Minimum tree coverage is not one of them. There are times when minimum tree coverage there may be a good reason to not require that. For instance, if you have a lot that is completely void of trees and has been, right? Maybe it's an old orange grove or whatever. It's been cleared for pasture for a number of years, and now you're going to build a house on it. Is the 1 tree per 2,500 square feet an appropriate solution for a 2.5 acre lot that has always been a pasture? That's a lot of trees, right? So there may be some times when some flexibility is warranted. It does not exist right now in the code. And so the only way to get a waiver for that is to go to the DRC and ask for that, which is a process, right? Especially if you're just talking about a lot, that guy's not going to DRC for anything else. So we are proposing to add the same sort of, flexibility that we have in some other sections. And then eliminate that alternative for the minimum number of trees on the residential lots.
But that's a subjective evaluation, correct?
It is, just like we have the ability, Keith can make the call on whether or not the 15%, there's some language in there about flexibility. With the intent being that, our goal as staff is to interpret the code the same for everyone, but every site is not the same. And if there is a legitimate reason to vary from the requirement, it's not always in the best interest of the applicant or the staff to say, now there's this bureaucratic process you have to follow. You might be able to get a waiver, but you have to apply for this and wait 6 weeks and all of it. So, but yes, anytime it's not black and white, there is some subjectivity that you enter into the equation.
Do we have any guidelines on that, or is it just based, this is my opinion, as
I mean, we certainly try to, memorialize those times that there is something other than the normal and use that as a standard.
I'm just trying to avoid favoritism or punitive
Right.
as well.
Sure. And that seems it comes down to the individual, which I guess we can't really control. But overall, it's a good thing to have this opportunity to waive requirements, right?
I disagree. I don't want Robert to get a waiver and I'm right down the door just because Keith and I don't get along, he doesn't give me one. And that's why I asked if there's some kind of. I'm just saying.
No, sure. It is.
Key seems okay.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jack.
I think discretion is always a double-edged sword. It's the kind of thing that I believe should be in ordinances, and that ability should be in the hands of a competent, specialty, but.
Isn't there some opportunity if Keith denies it, then you go before the DRC, so you're not left with no recourse. And I do think it's a positive thing to have that flexibility. Jessica?
Yeah, I was gonna say on the other side, I'm sure that we could look up, standards for review of a request would include and give you some parameters. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Tyler?
Is this for individual lot building permit applications and site development applications, the minimum standard that you're talking about for coverage?
So the flexibility, yes, would apply to site plan subdivisions, residential lots.
But with residential lots, it's replacement of cleared or 1 per 1,000. Is there also a 1 tree per 2,500 requirement on the individual lot?
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Okay. Sorry.
And that's one of the problems. You end up with a 2.5 acre, 2.5 or 4.9 acre lot, and they've got to plant 1 tree per 2,500 square feet.
You got $20,000 of trees
That's
going
been
in.
there, pasture for 100 years. I mean, is it something that we should base it off of, the side area, the house area? Is it something that maybe we reduce the size of the trees so they can plant smaller trees and spread them throughout the property? We can certainly write those things into the code if you want a definitive, this is what happens when this happens.
Standards or review or something like that. Yeah.
So, okay, and because I didn't want to belittle your point. I think it's a good point. And so Jessica, you're suggesting there can be parameters made for this when the county forester decides to waive or not? Because it seems to me if you can, why isn't it just part of the code? I thought, it seems to me this ability is a catch-all for those situations that you just can't anticipate. And I think ethics courses come into play here. You have to just hope, I don't know if you take ethics courses, but,
Try not to.
okay, well, as a principal, you try to adhere to it. I mean, we just can't, I don't think there are some things out of our control and there's some trust element. And I like the fact that the DRC can be appealed to and beyond that, the county council, correct? All right.
And I will say too, like, you know, a lot of the decision-making on the tree ordinance is relegated to the county forester. But those decisions don't happen in a vacuum. I was the county forester for a long time. Right? We have conversations about these strange situations. So Keith and I will have a conversation. We bring Clay in if there's, you know, any kind of thing that's unusual. And we try very hard to be consistent to the extent that you can be consistent with different sites, right? But, and, you know, you could probably ask anybody. We try to apply the rule the same way every single time, probably to the consternation of a lot of applicants, right? Like that's just what we have to do. So, but point is well taken that, you know, you could get a crooked county forester, I guess, you know, and that like certain people and not others, but we do have, you know, checks and balances against that kind of thing.
Not for another 10 years, you will.
All right, thank you.
All right, last of the 5. Specimen and historic trees are special and they're treated differently. And I know we had quite a conversation about this last time. So currently a historic tree is defined as a 36-inch live oak or bald cypress. Those are the only 2 things that could be historic. Historic tree removal requires the DRC. That is not an approval that the county forester can grant administratively.
Unless it's deteriorated.
Right, if it meets the definition of deteriorated, then it's an exempt tree. Right? And then we have this list of specimen trees, and it's kind of hard to read, but this is, of course, in the documents that we provided. But here's the list of current specimen trees. The smaller chart to the right is what the standard is, and so right now the standard is basically you protect specimen trees based on how many you have on your site. So if you have a site that has a lot of specimen trees per acre, so 8 or more, then you have to preserve 4 of those specimen trees per acre. And it goes down. So if you have a site that has very few specimen trees, so less than 3 per acre, then you have to preserve 80% of those. This is perhaps the most complicated part, I think, of the tree ordinance. You have to have a survey that shows all the specimens and know what their sizes are. And then you have to design your site to protect the requisite number based on how many you have per acre.
And the preservation of these specimen trees counts to your preservation goal?
If you save specimen trees and they're in an area that you set aside for tree preservation, they count as tree preservation. They don't count as replacement. Only small trees count as replacement, right? But ideally, the specimen trees that you save become part of your tree preservation area and count toward that 15% requirement. They also, of course, count toward your minimum number of trees per acre.
Okay, Jessica?
Just a question, is there a reason why we have a decimal? Like what is 0.1 of the tree? Should it be 3 to 5, 6 to 8?
Yes, we're proposing to make that chart a little more clear. Okay. It is problematic the way that it's in there right now.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the laurel oaks being specimen trees. City of DeLand as an example. I believe it's anything over 20 inches in the city of DeLand for a laurel oak. 1 minimum tree is all that's required to replace that. You know, and from my experience anyway, a laurel oak that gets to be 24, 25 inches in diameter is a hazard to everybody. Anyway, that's my only comment on that. Everything else is, I think, is fine.
Is it up there? It's up there, Laurel?
It's other oak species.
Yeah, I know it's listed, they sent.
Oh. I'm going to go Tyler and then you, Bill. Tyler?
It's in this meeting.
So
Oh, no,
to-
you had nothing? Okay.
Right there.
To that point, we had a 10-acre site in DeLand, and it had a bunch of laurel oaks on it, and it was $250,000, $380,000 actually to replace those trees. It was very significant.
So I just want to show you guys this. This is a recent laurel oak that was removed without a permit. And we got a call. We had to come out and take a look at it. It's 55 inches. Well over 100, probably around 150 years old or more. It is as solid of a tree as I've ever seen. The trunk was solid all the way to the top, had a beautiful canopy to it. So I would urge you to, zero. So not every tree is the same, and not all laurel oaks are bad, and not all laurel oaks are full of rot.
So the staff recommendation on the laurel oak issue would be that laurel oaks are important, and at large sizes, they are specimen, and wouldn't say, to add them to the historic list, but that we fall back on the fact that any tree that's considered deteriorated, and there's a clear definition in the ordinance, is exempt. So if it's a laurel oak and it's deteriorated, it's exempt. If it's a live oak, same thing. The staff recommendation would be that we don't eliminate them as a species, but that we continue to look at the condition of that tree when deciding if it needs to be counted as a specimen tree for the specimen requirements.
For clarification, where is the list of specimen? It's in the definitions, correct?
Yes.
Because I do not, unless I'm not understanding the botanical, maybe the botanical name is, this laurel oak is not listed in here. Unless I'm looking at something.
Other oak species.
Other oak species.
Oh, got it. Apologies. Thought that would be at the end. I don't know what, it's like mixed at the top, so I was.
I was referring to the email on 1229 and the different attachments to that.
I think he's talking about this.
It's a list of.
Proposed.
Oh, with the lifespan, is that the one you're
Yeah.
talking about? Yeah. So,
Okay.
so last time, you had asked for the typical tree species, what their growth rate is and their lifespan. Yeah, we get you that.
So just as a question, say we have a site with 100 laurel oaks that are pretty big, and I walk it and I feel like 65 of them have rot. Do I have to get an arborist report for all 65 of those trees and get Keith to concur that for all 65 of those trees in order for those to be exempted? Or is there a more streamlined process for that? I mean, obviously I can see a rot hole, but I can't fill the report out for it.
Well, I would say it's more important if there's a dispute. If you disagree with my findings, or I disagree with your findings, to have a third party like that, look at it from a fresh perspective or eye. If you were to have all those trees listed and put on a survey, and you can schedule a meeting, and I'll walk it with you just like I would your arborist.
And then just cross through the ones that are bad.
We can cross through the ones that are bad. The arborist report makes it quicker and easier, certainly, but.
Okay, Bill?
But you do have to have somebody who will make that determination in the first place, which would either be a surveyor who wouldn't know what they were talking about, or a biologist who might be able to do that, or an arborist just to do it in the first place.
Yeah,
So somehow,
you could have,
somebody needs to make that determination for you.
you could have a consultant, environmental biologist look at it as well, yeah.
In other words, if I've got a 100-acre tract, and I have trees on it, I've got to do a survey, bring it to you, you don't count and look at it, right? Right.
Yeah, if you're developing the property, yeah, you have to have the tree survey, and we come out, we verify the tree survey.
All right.
Yes. Yeah. You-
We're working on your behalf.
Okay, so this was the chart, but
That's right. Okay. And you're saying it is a problem to have the laurel oak on the specimen tree list?
That will remain my position.
Okay.
I don't disagree.
All right.
I'm in agreement with Bob that the water oaks and the laurel oaks, I mean, we have replacement. We have the criteria to save them. They're one of the most abundant trees on the sites we encounter. I find considering them all specimen creates more problems than the value it brings, but everybody's got an opinion.
Bill?
And then that would just increase the replacement requirements, right? If you couldn't avoid them.
Yeah, you would still have to replace them. Them being a specimen doesn't relieve you from the responsibility to replace trees that you remove. But I would just caution you that the fewer specimen trees you have on a lot, the more you have to keep.
Percentage
Yeah,
wise.
you get less flexibility in site design.
Right.
The fewer you have.
The more specimen trees you have, the fewer you have to keep per acre.
Yeah.
This, I love this, some information. Thank you for putting that together.
But yeah, you guys wanted this, for lifespan, and you also wanted to determine the growth rate and to kind of look at what trees you may also want to consider as historics.
Right.
So that's,
Okay. Think I'm getting the slide for that? There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I can.
Wow.
I've seen the chart about 1,000 times now.
Oh, okay.
I might have partial memorization.
Yeah, so what the little chart on the right says, again, if you have a lot of specimen trees, so 8 or more per acre, you have to save 4 per acre. But if you have a few, you have to save 80% of them, which means you have very little flexibility on how you arrange your site, because 80% of 4 trees is what? 4 trees, right? So you get to
know that you still have less per acre. So you get more on a big tract, you get a ton of acreage, you can get more flexibility, but on a small site, more specimen trees is just less flexibility.
Less flexibility.
Because if you have 3 or 4 acres and say you have 20 trees on it, so say 4 acres divided by 20, that's 5 per, so that would mean I have to save 65% of them. So that's 13 trees, so I can cut 7 down. I only have 3 acres to play with, so if they're spread out across the site, I've got to take a chunk that's like 35% of my site and preserve it in order to save those 7.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I'm on a bigger site, I might be able to stagger around it. So I would go back to the case by case. Sometimes you win, sometimes.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to that fundamental, thinking is, yeah, you'll have to pay. If you remove those specimen trees, then you can't make it work on the site. You'll have to pay into that fund. That's one side of looking at it. Ginger, how much are you rounding up? Because I'll let folks take a break.
Changes. Okay, some of the potential changes that we put in there, this was a question mark one. This is more of a for discussion. Eliminate the exemption for historic trees for single-family owner-occupied lots. Are we in the right place? Yeah. Or for lots without a bona fide ag use. We need to think about that. Right now, on those owner-occupied lots, you can remove a historic tree without any kind of permit. Expand the definition of historic to include pond cypress and longleaf pine. Those were the 2 that the staff had identified, but there's, room for discussion on others or not. We've added some potential language that would say on a subdivision, we're not going to create lots that have historic trees on them. So if you have historic trees in a potential subdivision site, it needs to be designed in a way that those trees are not on a single family lot. Update the definition of specimen trees. Our recommendation was to add pond cypress and black gum and longleaf pine, but again, up for discussion about what species might be added or removed. And then this gets to Tyler's last point, allow some flexibility in modification of specimen tree requirements based on site conditions. Same thing we talked about before. This is one of the sections that there is no ability for an administrative, any administrative flexibility. If you can't meet the requirement, you're headed to DRC for an appeal. And there are cases where there legit is not a way to save the required number of specimen trees and build whatever the thing is. Think about an Amazon distribution center or something where you can't be flexible in the design of the building. That's not something that we can administratively approve right now. So we're proposing to add that same flexibility language. Now, in the ordinance language that you saw, I had a little sort of bubble next to it that said, what kind of parameters should we set for that? So for instance, we were thinking, if you can't meet the specimen tree requirement, do you provide a little bit more tree preservation area? Or do you provide a little bit additional replacement? Like, what do you do instead of that specimen tree requirement? So that's something to discuss. Any kind of questions on that at the moment?
Oh, Sarah Lee?
For clarification, we are, all of these potential changes are specifically for Chapter 72,
Yes.
not the minimum standards.
Yes, so all of this today is about 72 specifically, and, you know, once we get through what your recommendations are for 72, I was going to ask, okay, what do you want to include in the minimum standards that applies to the cities, but yeah, 72 first at the moment. Okay. Okay, then we're almost there. Other potential changes that didn't really follow one of those 5 things. We've reordered to make it flow better. So we have a little chart to show you kind of how the reordering works. We've added language throughout to be more clear. Some things have been a little confusing. We added that section that makes it clear which sections apply to which types of development. So the kind of what I showed you, which things apply to single family residential and which things don't. We added a section that makes that very clear. And then we just throughout kind of removed redundancies and those sorts of things. So just some general cleanup. I don't expect that you can read the, I don't understand. What am I doing wrong here? Sorry. So did you guys not see that one? Did you not see this one when I was just talking about?
No, we saw that one.
This is the one we saw.
We didn't see the movement of sections.
You should activate a new PowerPoint.
No, I don't think so. Sorry. Try to click that. No.
And I think this one's still.
We're doing so well.
Yikes. Ginger, was the slide just showing what you spoke to, what you just said?
Showing you how they got reordered.
Uh-huh.
And so, and we'll put the PowerPoint up so you can
Sure.
see it on the web. And then it, where we added sections, it showed where we added sections. So the last 2 slides were really just, here's what the section used to be, here's what we're
Sure.
proposing.
Okay, and we'll get this shared to us. I think I may allow a break right now. Maybe we'll do that while you figure out the technical side. 5 minutes, 2:50 we'll reconvene. That's actually 6 minutes. Gave you an extra minute. See?
I'm reverting.
Yes, Simon's everything.
I thought I was.
No, I know we're not to have sidebars, but what do you think if we took that list and said everything that lives over 100 years should be installed?
Yeah, I would think that would be a fair, you know, for, yeah.
Eliminate
And-
question marks. Anything that lives over 100 should be historic. I get it.
Yeah, but you know, it's, you know,
That'll take
and
care of our water.
yeah.
Okay, so.
We're gonna have something on those guys, but
And then.
Black and you.
No, I do not. No, we have not had to go that far. We have the $300 on the roof thing that moves around the sticker and that.
did you
This
look
is
up
the
mom's
slide.
call you?
Oh, we have the schedule.
This is the same
It's
presentation
just,
you're on?
you know,
Yeah.
when you're negotiating with somebody that's more stubborn.
Just need to make that
Well, you know, it doesn't take long to get them into routine, though. You just have to be consistent.
One of the things that I would say is, like in my partnership, I'm about a 25%. I have a certain amount of voice and a certain amount of control. When I get outvoted, the other member that's in control should be my wife. I get outvoted.
I understand. I understand that.
Thank you. No, that's okay.
Your project. You have a project.
So, I read a book. There's a great book called Think Again. And it's all about getting people to look at all of the options. It's honestly not about getting them to think your way. It's about seriously getting the reasons why they do or think and have the position they have. And then ask questions to just, once again, try to get the wheels turning, because so many of us go into these things with preconceived notions, and many times those preconceived notions and your ideas are founded on bad information. And if you would put the brakes on, and this applies to all of us, not the holier than thou, not just children, it applies across the board.
Yeah, she's actually auctioning off the seat next to me. Chair. If anybody wants to.
I'll sit with you. I'm not scared of you. There's a seat right next to Keith.
Yes, we're having. It's at LEC and it is 9 to noon.
Yeah. She told me I had to be there, so that's how I know.
I do understand that. You do 25% of the partnership. I can only object.
She gets really bad. She didn't realize she's right.
Yeah, you can only object so long. Okay.
There's a specific purpose of tomorrow. Because, you know, Captain Spring, from the Department of Economic $75,000. They're gonna look at our, make recommendations for items. Content changes. Coaching, all of that. The first part of that is. Very much.
You're doing the right thing.
Make some of the.
Hello, Carrie.
Good. So you have a new, maybe not new, but CEO or something?
Oh, in my company? Yeah, Brett is the president. Brett.
Moving into a advisory role?
Yes. I've been doing this, sort of moving into that advisory for the last couple of years.
Where's Brett from?
He's actually myself. Technically.
I was the last
We are, aren't we? Mine's still.
If she's anything like me,
Well, I mean, your physical address.
Physical address has changed a year and a half. Yeah. Shoot me an email.
Okay, cool.
And actually, you probably have a recent email from me. Just look at the bottom of it. It's the New York. We're on New York Avenue now.
Okay.
Downtown Deland.
Yeah.
We were on
I checked your
15A.
website too. I thought
And
it
well,
had
that
what
just
was
got
on.
updated. That had some bad information on it up to
Oh,
about a
okay.
month ago.
Oh, and that probably was when I looked at it. It was a month ago.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
yeah,
All right, cool. I'll
It's
send you an
just all
email.
been cleaned up. But yeah, absolutely. I have no intention of dropping my
Yay,
B
okay, good.
partnership.
Yay,
No,
okay, good.
No, no.
And hopefully Brett, as he takes on more and more, he'll get
Hopefully.
involved.
Keep our fingers crossed.
it's interesting.
I'm gonna send you the calendar invitation to.
And that's, I mean, the tree.
Oh.
Oh, and so, public.
Physically doing work on a garage apartment for my daughter. So her granny's in her 90s and she's in the house with her guys, and there's a garage in the back, and she goes, well, we're going to make that a garage apartment, and I'll just bring her in. Well, that's a great idea. I can do that. So you see me wincing and holding my right shoulder because I've been swinging a frame for the last month.
All right.
Any kind of shape.
If we want to go ahead and take our seats.
Yeah, I wish I had. I'm definitely not in shape to do that anymore.
I'll give Ginger a minute to
I've been swinging a
talk to the chair.
for my daughter in a
What?
garage apartment, and I've actually been doing all the remodel work.
Yeah,
and
to the Clay Henderson.
cleaning up behind the framers and all this kind of stuff. And
I got on the chain
No.
calls after this.
No, we're just going to listen.
I got one of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let us,
So, yeah, we need a gavel. There you go.
let's reconvene and let's go ahead. I know many of us are probably anxious to start taking some action, make recommendations. So Ginger, if that's the end of your presentation.
That is just the pre-order business.
Okay, so as a matter of process, we've all had great time to discuss. We've got to ask our questions. We've got some good ideas. We know where we're coming from. We're going to go through this, and if there's objections, you can make a comment, but I'm going to call for the vote pretty quick so we can have some recommendations, take some action today. Okay? Yes. So on the ENRAC comments, and unless Ginger, you have otherwise, but I had that we never voted on,
Anything.
oh, okay. Some stuff didn't require votes, but no, we voted on the first thing to remove the reduction in crime and to rephrase that, so we can be proud of that. Okay, the historic trees located on residential owner-occupied property, should it be exempt or not? We did not take action on that, so I'm going to go ahead and entertain a motion. On the first page 3 of the ordinance, line 75 to 84, and in the comments, it's on the front page of the comments that were made. That's what I'm following, is the comments that were made and compiled into a single document. Line 75 to 84. Actually, Melissa, this was your comment. And so it is a question. Page 3 of the ordinance, line 75 to 84. Yes. So I will entertain a motion.
All right, I'm going to make a motion then.
So 82, line 82, right?
Perhaps. I'm looking at the comments, but
Question here that I don't think is answered about how this would align with state law,
Yeah, I think
We said the county rules can't supersede state law. I think the discussion where we ended on this was, I know Bliss, who's not here, had concerns over how it would apply, and she said she wanted to look into it more. Maybe she did, but she's not here. And we talked about the main concern was insurance requirements. And so I think, I can't speak for the group, but the general consensus was maybe it has a purpose, maybe we're improving property rights, we're concerned about insurance, and we said we could probably carve out where if you provide a letter from your insurance company, that it would be an exception or something.
Right, yeah. And I think Keith confirmed that there is a process to kind of ask for a waiver to remove the tree if your insurance company is,
Right, you can
Hitting you
apply
on
for a
it.
permit for removal and ask the ERC to remove it, and that could be one of your reasons why, and then they can make a determination. And if they deny it, then you can appeal that to the council, and the council can hear it.
understood. All right, Sarah Lee, were you going to make a motion? Oh,
So,
I was going to make a motion,
what?
Oh,
go ahead.
and then we could discuss the motion if it even gets a second.
okay.
I haven't made the
Okay.
motion. All right, so you
wait.
might not want to second it, but here we
Let-
go.
Let's have Sarah
I'm
Lee make the
making a
motion.
motion that we remove the exemption status of historic trees located on residential owner-occupied property.
Do we have a second? Melissa? Discussion? Objections? Otherwise, all those in favor, say aye.
I have a discussion.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay, Bill?
So, I guess what I would want to know is what problem are we trying to solve here? We have a rule, it's in place, it's an exemption. Why are we taking that away from the public? And I would say, no, let's not do that.
Well, and I guess the thought process that I heard at the last meeting is if we went to all that trouble to preserve the historic tree during development, and then the homeowner can just come on and clear it, I think they're trying to avoid that. That would,
Different
But-
issue, because that is, now you're going to handle that by saying you can't put a historic tree on a residential lot. You have to put a historic tree in a different platted.
Which I think
Area.
is a
That's different.
worse change, so I would rather do this than.
okay, yeah, and we'll get to that, right?
I think a good example of this is the Bartram Oak, and we talked about this in the previous meeting. It's on private property. If they want to cut it down, they can. And there's nothing any of us can do. to
Is
stop
it owner occupied lot?
They're planning on building a house on it, yeah.
Well,
So as soon as it gets built, it's done. I mean, they're not going to, of course. They love the tree, but they want to keep it. We have done things to help preserve it, but there is the possibility of something like
So
that.
during the construction of the house, that is not exempt. If you propose to remove the tree to construct a house, it would not be exempt. But as soon as you live in the house, you build the house, you live in the house, and you can take it down. And we've had situations where we've made people go through the process. They wanted to remove the historic tree, they go through the process. It gets denied, and they move in, and now they can cut it down. So they went through the hoops, and they build their house around the tree, but as soon as they move in and it's owner occupied, they can cut it down. So
Okay,
that's kind of, I don't, the question about what are we trying to fix is that strange situation where until you live in your house, we're gonna make you do all kinds of things to not remove the tree, but once you live in it, you can. So.
Jessica?
I was gonna say, I think if we could include, because I think the hoop of appealing to DRC and then maybe council is too much. If you have a certified letter from an insurance company saying, we won't insure your house unless you remove this tree, which is what we talked about. So I'm in support of removing it for the reasons stated, but I think we should include an exception where you provide the county forester a certified letter from your insurance company requiring removal.
Okay. Melissa? And I'll do Tyler, Bob. John.
Just to keep the big picture, the whole beginning of this ordinance talks about the value of trees and how important they are. And then the entire ordinance talks about how we can get rid of them. And to me, that's a big disconnect. But I do understand, because I'm sitting here at the table with all kinds of other people that have different experiences and different knowledge bases, that you have brought up legitimate concerns. And I think the idea of a waiver for insurance purposes is fair, certainly fair. We don't want to make life more difficult for people, but in my view, nor do we want them just cutting down trees for, I would almost call it vanity's sake. And I've seen it happen because I live in an area where it's individual lots principally.
Tyler?
So I think I'm generally not against removing the exemption, but I think my concern is, if I have a historic tree right next to my house, I'm going to keep it pruned so that I don't have a ton of weight that's going to fall over my bedroom or things of that nature. And if it gets to a point where it's sick or diseased, the burden of the process is what I'm not going to appreciate with removing the exemption. And so I'd want to maybe, in this case, give some discretion to Keith to help those homeowners. Maybe give the county forester, so it doesn't have to go to DRC. If the forester agrees that this is a hazard, and that's not an insurance company necessarily agreeing, because
Sure.
I like that idea. I'm just not sure that we're going to do it.
Well, Keith, don't you already make exceptions for diseased
Yeah,
and?
so if someone were to have a historic tree and it's right next to their house and saying it's going into decline, they can call us, we'll come out, we'll inspect the tree, we'll say it meets the definition of deteriorated or poses a significant hazard, and they can remove it
Yeah.
without permitting. The only thing I would caution about the insurance, if the people call and say, hey, I need a letter from the insurance company so I can remove this historic tree, the insurance company is going to give it to them.
Okay. I'm gonna go to Bob and then John, go ahead.
It's been covered.
Oh, John.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just talk about that process for insurance purposes. Because I get a letter, I've got 30 days to remove that tree from, or they'll cancel me. How long is it gonna take me to come see you, and you to come see it, and give me the approval because I got the letter from the insurance company? And then if I lose my insurance and I can't get anybody else to insure me, then I'm in a quandary. And I know there's an exception for things, and if you're gonna have power to put so many trees in an open field, then you should have the power to be able to give somebody an exemption if that's the waiver you're gonna give for insurance purposes.
Sure. Yeah, two situations where a person could take advantage of it or a person is legitimately in trouble. Let's do this. Let's vote on the motion on the floor. And if it fails, someone can certainly make a motion to amend it to include allowing a waiver for the letter from insurance. So, no, Jessica's saying, Jessica's
I'm just
frowning.
making faces. I'm just wondering.
Oh, okay.
I think from a Robert's rules, you're the chair.
Ooh.
We would amend if we were in favor of amending the original and vote on that.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, well, so do we take a motion to amend the original?
No,
Got it.
it was covered, so
She had a
that's why
motion
I
on
went
this.
back.
Right,
No,
so
I'm good. I'm good.
Sarah Lee, do you
with
want to
that.
amend that or should we?
Okay, so I want to clarify. Okay. We take, if the historic tree now if there's a desire of a homeowner to remove a historic tree, right, and it's not exempt, talk us through, before we add language to this amendment, talk us through, regardless of why this owner wants to remove it right now, I want to know, how do they approach that?
So let's say you approve this, or the exemption removal, and someone has a historic tree and it's not deteriorated, and they don't have a letter from their insurance company, and they still want to remove it anyway. They can apply for a tree removal permit, a standalone tree removal permit. And that permit would go in front of the DRC, and the DRC would make the ultimate decision on whether they grant the approval for the removal of the tree or not. If it's just there.
Let's say it's a deteriorating tree.
Well, if it's deteriorated, it will never get to DRC. I'll grant the removal by code now. I mean, it's just going to follow the tree removal permit code. It's not like there is no recourse. They can never touch it. They could always go through the permitting process. And if the DRC doesn't uphold or doesn't grant them the permit, then they can appeal the decision to county council. And the county council could then say, no, we don't grant the approval for the removal. And then they're kind of stuck, and then it takes them a year before they could come back and go in front of council again.
So I guess.
All I'm trying to discern is whether all these amendments are necessary.
The amendment I said about the insurance you're talking about?
That's what I'm trying to discern.
Yeah, they can apply for tree removal permit, and that could be the basis of their tree removal permit is the insurance company wants them to remove it because they
And-
deem it as a hazard.
And talk us through currently, what would be the timeline if somebody did get a notice from an insurance company and now needs to get a permit, get it removed? What kind of timeline are we talking about?
Well, it would be on the DRC timeline, so it would probably be a month. What would you say, Carol?
Yeah, about 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I see all these cards going up. We have a motion on the floor. I really encourage us to let's take some action. So the motion on the floor is to remove the exemption for historic trees. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Can we see Hanson? Because I can't see.
To remove the exemption.
The motion is to remove the exemption, which means you cannot remove a historic tree. All the,
Without a permit.
without a permit, without a permit, without a permit, without a permit, that's,
Yeah.
Let's be clear.
Yeah.
folks. You can remove
okay,
it. You just have to go through the permitting process.
okay.
But they can say
They can say no. So all those in favor, let me see your hands, because this is hard to see who,
favor of removing.
in favor of removing the exemption. I can vote, right?
Yeah. Well, usually only in a tie.
Oh,
You
wait,
don't have to
okay.
vote. You don't have to vote.
What do we got? 1, 2,
Yes.
hold them up, 3, 4, 5, 6.
No, I'm sorry, scratching my head.
Oh, Tyler, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there were 9 of us, so motion carries 6 to 9. Did you get that, Brianna?
What the hell is my
All right, moving on.
list of historic? I'm sorry. Ginger, could you throw a list of historic trees up there? I've got specimens, but for some reason I can't find the
There are
historic.
only two. There's only, there's
All
bald
right,
cypress.
what
and-
size? 36 inches. Oh, those are the only 2 trees we're talking about.
Okay.
36 inches right now, right now. We might change that, but right now the historic.
Okay,
trees,
I see,
36
I see Jack has wanted to say something. Go ahead, Jack.
Well, I just want to clarify that, are we going to add another motion relative to the exemption for insurance? We just,
Well, can't you make that motion?
I think we'd have to reopen the last motion. The motion passed fully on remove the. exemption.
exactly.
You can't make another motion.
Other one, you have to
No,
reopen it.
you can make another.
Yeah.
Well,
Why couldn't you?
You could make another.
You can have someone who voted affirmatively for the last motion, bring the motion back.
Okay,
Reopen it, right.
okay,
So that's why we should make sure the final motion is ready before we vote.
okay, got it.
Then
Go
I'd
ahead.
like to make that motion to bring it
Great.
back in order to include the exemption relative to insurance.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Hold on. We need to discuss it.
Go ahead,
I
discussion.
want to understand the difference, okay,
Mhm.
in the process for removal.
Well, I think all we're,
No, okay, no, I understand your motion.
okay.
So I have a letter from the insurance. How is the process to remove it different than if this motion did not exist?
Well, we would write it probably similar to, if they have an arborist letter that states that it's deteriorated, it would be something similar to that. They would provide us the documentation and there would be no permit required, basically. So they wouldn't have to get a tree removal permit. They wouldn't have to provide a replacement. They wouldn't have to go to DRC, none of those things. So basically that's it. It's exempt if they have that one letter.
What if it's a
from
healthy tree and they ask you to remove it?
If it's a healthy tree and they ask to remove it, if they have that exemption or that letter from the insurance company, then it's still exempt if you add that exemption. If you don't add that exemption, they would need to get a permit for removal.
Jessica?
And that is my concern, that by putting the exemption into the ordinance specifically, it will be abused.
Okay, Jessica?
So I would say we have a bigger loophole now, but I understand that. My concern is it's 4 weeks to get to DRC. If they vote no, you have an appeal to county council, your insurance is dropped to you. If county council says no, you have no home insurance. You have to remove it. And if you get a permit to remove it, because the insurance is telling you they will drop you, if not, I don't think you should have to pay tree mitigation fees.
Okay, Tyler?
Yeah, the reason I voted no is because I wanted to see this exemption included in some kind. I'd like to maybe say that Keith needs to be able to have some involvement in this in an accelerated fashion, because if you get a month and you have to wait 4 weeks to get to DRC, I mean, I can call a tree guy, but he may not come.
Right,
cut my
and that's
tree down.
Jack's motion, correct?
That's
To allow
right.
Keith
It's
that-
in order to, I'm only making the motion in order to make this faster, and granted, it allows for abuse, but most of these things do. So I'm just trying to move this thing on to make it more clear, and
You want to-
that's all.
Okay, hold on, let me, Bill?
Yeah, I agree. If we could just have that language of the, what's actually allowed, and then it doesn't have to go to permitting, that would be great.
Okay, Alex?
Can we change the motion to, or from the insurance letter to the discretion of the forester? Then Keith,
With or without the letter?
yes, with or without the letter, discretion of the forester.
Now
And
bypass
then Keith, if they
DRC.
bring that letter to Keith, obviously he has the ability to say no or yes to remove the tree.
And the other thing, if you use the
Okay.
word emergency, that could apply is this tree has been damaged because of a storm and it's leaning. And there's, Keith should have the discretion to go out there and go, oh, yeah, unfortunately, this tree's history now, you can get rid of it and not have to go through
Okay.
that whole process.
We have that emergency stuff already. We have deteriorated trees.
Does that apply?
County managers, but that said, not the county forester.
Well,
So we're
true.
talking
If we're in a disaster declaration, like we have right now for this
The
one.
manager has to declare the declaration.
All right, so there is a motion on the floor. Jessica?
Just one final note on the forester discretion versus insurance. I'm going to ask Keith, do you want to be put in a situation where the insurance is going to say, we're going to drop you homeowner? I say it's not working today.
Homeowner?
And you say, this is a healthy historic tree. I don't see a purpose to remove it other than the insurance saying, do you want me to cut there?
Yeah. I think if you put that exemption in there, it does place us in the middle in that battle. The staff, I would rather see it go to DRC and let the DRC, because it's a panel and they can vote on it.
I feel like we've had three different ideas. We've had, if you have the insurance thing, you're completely exempt. You don't even go through the process. If you have the insurance thing, maybe the forester has some discretion and it doesn't.
That's gonna be
You still
hard.
need a permit, but you wouldn't have replacement and it wouldn't go to the DRC or the regular process, which is DRC. My personal belief is that it should not be the middle one. It should be either it's exempt because you have this insurance requirement. Now, they should have to produce the document.
Right.
I agree.
Or it's just the normal process. Adding a different process is problematic.
Okay, and Jack's motion is the first one. And so how do you do it when there's a this or that? Can we vote on this? And if it fails, then you vote on the that? Okay.
Well,
Bill.
Can we do that and, but also add that you don't have to pay tree replacement?
Well, the motion right now is they'd be exempt, so they wouldn't pay.
Yeah, they wouldn't
They'd
pay
be
anyways. That's
completely
what's on the floor.
Right.
All right,
Point of order.
go ahead, John.
Motion is to bring the original
Yeah.
motion back.
First, you have to vote on that.
Okay.
have to
Then you
change it.
gotta amend it.
Yeah.
And then it goes.
Very good. Let's vote on bringing the motion back. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Does he have to make another motion to amend it?
Yes.
He has to say it again out loud?
Does Sarah Lee have to make?
The original movement, I think, has to, unless I'm incorrect.
Okay, Sarah Lee, we make the amendment?
Amend your motion and I'll second.
Oy.
I'd like to make an emotion, not an emotion. I'd like to make a motion. I hope I word this right. That historic trees be removed from the exemption with the exception that if the request for removal is accompanied by a letter from the homeowner's insurance company.
Chris put his card up. That can't be a good thing. Oh, okay.
Did I say that right?
That was me fidgeting.
Oh, was it? Okay, I was like, that's not a good thing. Okay,
And I was the original second, so I second.
so Bob seconds. All those, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We did it. We did
There
it.
we go. There we go.
Yeah, and it was unanimous. Okay, moving on.
We can get to 3 today. We need to call it quits.
All right. So now we are on, I'm sorry. Okay, so the 1 year, okay, should it be no more than 1 year? This is on line 88. About the 3 years, staff had asked, what is the right number? So I will entertain a motion for the right to, oh, do you all see that on line 90? The 3 is commented on. We need to vote on what that right number looks like. I will entertain a motion. Wendy,
I would move to increase it to 5.
do I have a second?
Second it.
Second by Jack. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that's 1, 2, 3. Right? 3? Okay.
I think you need to get people ready. Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? 5. Motion carries. All right, moving on. Okay, keep through your period. All right, there we are. Seems wrong reference. We always separate needed. That's not sure. Okay. Okay, line 145. And the issue is airport protection.
But can we go
Yeah,
back
wait,
real
wait,
quick? We
Sure.
have Line 129, we had suggested removing this plant rights of way.
Mm-hmm.
Private rights of way shall be designed to preserve as many trees as possible. We had proposed to strike that language. There was a comment, might have been,
Mine was just, why is,
Yeah, why is it being deleted?
what's the purpose?
so, right, Keith and I had a long conversation about this because this language wasn't super clear. And that's part of it was, so what basically the A above says that an existing rights of way, protected trees are exempt if it's, they need to be removed for safety, et cetera, except for historic trees. Then B is planned rights of way, so they're not existing rights of way. So first of all, we didn't think they even belonged together, right? The heading is existing rights of way. But what B said was basically you had to get a permit to remove historic and specimen trees in planned public rights of way in new development.
Which you have to do anyway.
Which you have to do, right? So.
Does anyone take issue with the deletion and want to make a motion, or can we carry forward? Wendy, did you still want to say something? No, okay. All right, and that Melissa had a comment on the same thing. She had a question, so hopefully that answered it. Oh, go ahead, John.
Yeah, but specimen and historic trees require permitting, so it's.
All right.
I second it.
Second by Jack. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Jessica, were you? No? Okay. So moving on to line 145. I support they're making change to airport protection. Any new exemptions will require a Chapter 50 change. Okay, so what are you asking here? Ginger?
Well, there's 2 points here. We were proposing to add, so everything here that wasn't underlined are additional
right.
exemptions.
Right.
Just my comment is to say that any new exemptions have to be allowed by chapter 50. So if we add exemptions here, we have to address that when we talk about chapter 50, because we cannot have more exemptions in 72 than exist in 50.
Understood.
Right. So
Okay.
that's my comment here. But the reason these are highlighted is because Bliss had some comments about runway protection zones, et cetera. She wanted to make sure we were being consistent with FAA requirements. I don't think that what we have here is inconsistent. She went into a little bit more detail, and I'm not super familiar with the FAA requirements. But the intent of this was basically to say, if the FAA is telling you, airport, that you have to take out a tree, the county should not really be getting in the way of that. Right?
Sure.
So that was sort of the intent of this exemption. And then there was also a comment about road projects, and I think that was
Alex, yeah. So we'll take these one by one. I'll entertain a motion on exempting airport protection tree for airport protection.
Second.
And, okay, Bob made the motion, Tyler seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Road projects, I'll entertain a motion. Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead, Tyler.
My only comment is if we go back to section A, if you're just talking about, says that we still have to be protected in this trees. So I like those trees and roads are often in disaster recovery. I think this is a good exception versus what we do in the other sections.
That's a great point, because in this section, I hadn't thought about that. In this section, this is like when you're creating a subdivision and you're planning a new right-of-way, not necessarily the construction of a road.
Well,
In
I'm
my
talking
mind, this was.
He's talking about the one above it.
I'm talking about the section
Go
above
to the,
Yeah, here.
no, above it. One more. Go to A.
That's A.
Protected trees except historic. So this would be taking the historic part out. Right.
So this is an existing road that already exists.
Right.
Built, and you have to remove trees for visibility, exempt, except for if it's a historic, you need to get a permit. So then this.
I guess it wouldn't be in conflict. I'm just thinking that we should maybe go further.
But do you want historic trees removed from rights of way, like the loop?
No. Yeah. No, I'm saying yes.
Do you want?
Wait, okay.
Do you want historic trees removed from Glenwood? That's what this does.
What does? If we remove it.
If you approve this section 7.
Oh.
If you approve it.
If you say yes, you want 7, then that means the county can take out any tree in any right of way without any approval or any permits.
I see.
So you don't like the addition.
Local, state, and federal public road. Yeah, you have to get all the required in conjunction with, and that's the part that I was missing in the first part.
Okay. All right. So Keith has made a comment. Jessica?
Yeah, so I guess on that comment, it would be if concurrency review said the loop needed to be widened to 120 feet.
There's not going to be a review from county about county road projects. We don't get to review them.
You don't review them anyways?
They say they're exempt.
Well, then they should be exempt.
Right, so here.
Yeah, I mean, it's you guys. You guys got to resolve it. I'm just kidding. Okay, so, Melissa?
Okay, so now I'm confused. Using the loop example, Walter Boardman Drive, the loop now, Google Maps sends everybody through off of I-95, through Walter Boardman Drive, through High Bridge Road to the beach side. I live over there, that's why I know this. And Walter Boardman's a lane, it's like a little causeway going over water. So right now, what you just said, Keith, is county roads, we need to widen it, we're just gonna go and do it. Even though right
You would
now
have
it says
no
we
say.
can't.
Okay, well, okay, so having that understand.
Currently, to remove a historic tree, even in the right of way, the road and bridge would need to ask for permission from the DRC and get a permit to remove it.
But
This takes that away. No, you
Jessica?
disagree with that?
Jessica?
Just for point of clarity, if they don't need permits to do the work, have they ever asked for a historic tree removal permit?
It's been the position of legal that the county doesn't have to follow Chapter 72 requirements. That they only have to follow Chapter 50 and the comprehensive plan. So we stick to the fact that Chapter 50 requires approval and tree removal permits for historic trees. So we hold our divisions and departments accountable by Chapter 50.
Okay. In which this is not exempt. In which it is not exempt.
Unless you approve this language.
Unless you prove this.
I thought this was a staff recommendation.
Yeah.
Yes. it is.
Not this staff.
What staff? I don't understand.
Okay, well, okay, we've got the facts. Oh, Clay did. We have the facts. Okay.
Well, okay, wait, let's.
But why?
Let's pull back just a second. It has been the county attorney's position that, like Keith said, the requirements in the comprehensive plan and the requirements in Chapter 50 apply to county projects, but the requirements in Chapter 72 do not. So by practice, and this mostly, maybe the word local is part of the problem.
Yeah.
By practice, if the state DOT or the Federal Highway Administration is going to build a road, they are going to build a road and they are not coming to Volusia County to get a tree removal permit. Won't happen. We could shout, holler, it's not going to happen, right? So the intent of these additions was to capture those things that in practice are true now. So maybe what makes this more palatable is if we take out the word local.
Yeah.
Because the state and the federal road projects are never going to come and get a tree permit. But they're not technically exempt. So we're kind of like code nerds over here wanting to say, we want to apply the code as it's written. And we know we're not, because they're not coming to get a permit.
Okay.
So maybe if we took out the word local.
Okay.
that would-
Hold on one more. Alex?
My mind goes to self-exclusion, massive. Roadway, just the local roadways, not just the DOT and the influence. I don't want to see those local roadways just completely.
Sure. And Ginger's suggesting to remove the word local. Okay. John?
Yeah, so in that word local, that includes county and county. So you threw the example of Glenwood, that county road, is that county road?
Grand Avenue, is that what you're talking about? It's county.
Just trying to get that clarity in my head. So county roads are local, state and federal highways are exempt.
Okay. I think I'll entertain a motion, then we'll have a bit more discussion. I mean, I'm not sure what we're debating at this point. Sarah Lee?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second. Sorry.
All right, Sarah Lee,
I
go
think
ahead.
the motion I want to first make is that the language in item number 7 that begins on line 147, road projects, I'd like to make a motion that we remove the word local.
And keep the rest of the additions. Is that what you're?
Yeah, keep everything else, but my initial motion is first to remove the word local and then to recommend inclusion of the language from line 147 through 150.
Okay, and Wendy?
I will second that.
Wendy seconds. Bob?
So you're happy to move an increase in your taxes? Because every time we put regulations on public works, all we're doing is increasing our taxes. Because the roads that are getting built with our taxes. And if we increase the regulatory burden on a road that's needed, then all we're doing is increasing the cost and we're increasing our taxes.
I may or may not agree with your statement that this particular language increases taxes. However, I still stand by my motion.
I'd like just point of clarity. This is an exemption to these governments from having to go through the bureaucratic process.
I have recommended removing the word local.
Yeah.
Oh, so that then the local government does have to go. Got it. Okay, got it. Understood. Tyler, go ahead.
So we discussed that right now, the only trees that are protected for local government projects are historic trees, or is that only for Volusia County local government projects? And that if it was City of Osteen's, is there a city? City of Daytona, City of DeLand, City of Orange City, if they had a project that was coming forward that was going to be requiring the removal of a tree within Volusia County right-of-way for an intersection improvement of their roads, say.
They won't do it on a county road.
Okay, well, I've dealt with projects where this is the case, where I'm working for City of Apopka and we're working on county roads and state roads. I've worked on projects for City of DeLand on county roads, so I'm going to argue that they would and that I have dealt with this in my career. My question is, would we be required for regular protected tree replacement permitting, specimen tree permitting, and historic permitting, or just historic?
Well, currently it's just historic and this doesn't change that.
Okay, and does that apply
Because
to cities as
We
well?
have the other stuff above that was existing public rights of way. So, that's what we have for our regulation. This would just remove the locals, so that would take that out.
So this exemption is going to apply to new public right-of-ways of other agencies. All development right-of-ways are excluded under all considerations, just for point of clarity.
This ordinance is only in the county. This is 72.
Okay.
Correct. Jessica?
So my thought is, and I'll lean on Chris here, I would bet some sum of money that state and federal projects are exempt from local permitting regulations under state or federal statute. So if we remove local, there's no point in having this provision.
That's what I was taught at DOT.
Yeah.
Got it. Wendy?
And if we
Oh,
don't
no.
do the
Go ahead.
addition, we're no different than we are right now, right?
Yeah, I think that staff just wants to feel comfortable they're abiding by the code as it is. Bill?
That was my, sorry, I mean, that was my understanding is that staff is just trying to clean up the language so it actually reflects
What's
the current
happening?
practice.
Yeah, correct. Correct. All right. Bill?
Well, I was thinking this was an exemption for all the tree ordinance and that to apply to state and federal, but not the county. Is that not what it's doing?
Yes, that is what the motion is to the county.
Actually, I still have another question. And if we have a new county alignment road that has trees that are removed and none of them are historic, do they have to be replaced?
Well, I mean, if it's planned.
And I have a new county road alignment I'm designing right now that does not include tree replacement. It would increase the budget by a substantial amount of money to Bob's point, increasing our taxes.
So right now, I think this is the language that would govern. Planned, public, or private rights of way shall be designed to preserve as many trees as possible. However, historic and specimen trees may only be impacted the county permit requirements.
So we just removed that.
Well, what it means is you'd have to go to DRC to impact the historic and specimen trees.
So
That's the permit requirements for specimen and historic. But you have to do that regardless.
But the
It's kind of
question
redundant.
is, under the amendments we're making, what would be the result for regular protected trees that have the 15% trunk area replacement requirement? Would those become protected if we don't have an exemption for local and we've taken this?
You're talking about like in a new development where you're creating a subdivision road that will
He's
be.
talking about for county projects.
The county road is for extending your from Blue Lake.
Oh, okay,
It's a
okay.
county project. The question is the county require themselves to buy additional property to replace trees? Because I don't have anywhere to plant them in the road. For building a road and stormwater ponds, we will have to go acquire land in order to accommodate a change like this. It would be extremely disruptive to my project, but it would also be extremely expensive for the public.
Okay.
And that's my question, is I'm wanting to make sure we're not
I've got chapter 50 here.
All right, hang on one second. We'll find these.
I mean, we own enough right away to build roads, utilities, drainage, sidewalks. We don't have any other.
Well, the county's got enough land that they can dedicate it as an NVRA and take care of any tree replacement. We have thousands and thousands of acres, so you could take care of it that way.
And Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, but already the county holds itself to Chapter 50 standards, so.
Which is, I thought, I mean, I'm following instructions on.
Yeah.
From my project management team, so.
Now-
When they told me what to do, I didn't question the decision.
Okay, well, Ginger's looking up the answer. Go ahead, Sarah Lee.
No, I think Tyler is bringing up a really good point that has me now confused, quite frankly, about the vote to delete the language in 3B and the motion that is currently on the floor.
Okay. Okay, so 3B is being proposed to be removed. And public-private way shall be.
Any protected tree except historic trees within an existing.
Yeah, because here's where I'm at. I'm thinking of Beresford. That right-of-way alignment has been in place.
Since 1989.
And,
So,
Permanent in 91.
okay,
portion.
Sarah Lee, so 3B is removing the requirement to
Yeah,
adhere.
exactly.
So what, yeah, so
Exactly.
what's,
So if we're removing the requirement for 3B,
yeah,
why do we want to remove the word local?
I don't want to.
I understand where you are. I'm
oh, I
questioning.
see.
I almost think there's an inconsistency between voting for.
And we got
It
rid of
is
the
an-
exemption and we're putting it back.
Yeah.
The language in 7, we take the local out, we've eliminated the exemption.
Yeah.
So, yes, I
And
see now.
I think that it would be NBRAs is probably we would use conservation land that we already have. So what we're doing is creating additional bureaucratic work in order to build roads. That doesn't come through.
Okay,
Well,
okay,
see,
well,
you see, Bob, if you'd said it that way.
so,
Currently, chapter 50 just discusses existing
All right, we still
public
have a
rights of
motion.
way, so it doesn't cover a new roadway.
okay, did everyone, Tyler, did everyone hear that from Keith, that in Chapter 50, it covers existing right-of-ways, not new development? So he's safe,
It
right?
doesn't cover, it doesn't say, it says existing public rights of way. It say existing and or approved or planned public rights of way.
Right.
So we have no addressing of public rights of way other than existing.
Not new ones, just existing ones. So if you want to put an exemption for local government, then you
I
would.
think we could be close.
This is the place to do it.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
motion on, Jessica?
I just want to summarize, make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
We're hearing the practical impacts of removing an exemption is that, well, not adopting this exemption.
Go
We
ahead.
already removed the other one.
Yeah.
Is that the county will set aside land that's already set aside for conservation to check a box. The roadway itself is not going to be preserved to any further extent, and we're going to get in the way of planning for infrastructure, is my summary thought.
If we do what?
If we don't have an exemption.
For local,
right.
The language in 7 to remove it.
Correct.
Sheesh. Alex?
One thing in this, if I walking down your bet, please correct me. It's my understanding that if we're setting aside land that's already conserved as additional area protection, and traditional conservation easements can be vacated. So this exemption is protecting lands that's already protected, and we're further protecting and making it harder to.
They can clear them now. They frequently clear them, harvest trees and then sell them.
On the county lands?
Yeah, so land management activities are exempt from the tree ordinance. So you could have a conservation land, one of our pollution forever properties, and they could remove trees. Typically, they only do that if it's part of the restoration plan to get to the desired future conditions. So they would remove trees that were planted, like row crop trees. But they are, like, they could, if they got a wild hair, I guess, say, oh, we're gonna remove this section of, you know, old growth trees. They wouldn't do that. They do remove trees for timber purposes.
I'm not talking about the removal of the tree, I'm talking about the removal of the easement.
Oh, vacating easement, if there's.
Most conservation lands don't have easements on them.
Mm-mm.
Like our county conservation lands are not typically protected by a conservation
No.
easement. They're protected because we own them and they're.
Currently, I just want to clarify, land management activities aren't exempt, but this will exempt them, to clarify that. And their conservation fee is not exempt under the exemptions either. The only thing I would say is, you know, if you want to exempt local road projects and maybe you want to save historic trees that are in there, maybe you add historic tree language to this, which will protect areas like the Loop and Grand Avenue, and it's just a thought, but it's up to you.
Got it. Jessica?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, and I know that this is dragging, but we're making big decisions here, as you can see, like
No
millions
doubt.
dollar impacts.
No doubt.
The administration of not having an exemption for local road projects. What I think that would look like is you do, one, you pay someone to do a tree calculation of the proposed road project, which is miles and miles long. You have to assess historics and specimens in that. And then you have to survey some part of county land to have a representative tree sample of what trees are in that county land and carve off piece by piece with specific surveys on which area has already been dedicated based on this road and this road and this road. And the accounting of that, I just don't think is going to happen. And so I worry that we're creating a process that's not going to be enforced and will stand in the way or create opposition that then we have to track down all of this administrative stuff, and it's just kind of overall a mess.
Bill?
So, but if we vote and accept this exemption in 7 without the word local struck out, then we're good, right?
Then it'll be good. Okay, Melissa?
Okay, so we established, I don't know how many years ago, that number 7, from a practical standpoint, isn't really necessary because roads are not, federal and state roads would not be subject to any kind of scrutiny, oversight, permitting anything by the county. And we were talking about local. Keith said something a minute ago that brings us back to home base, which is if the idea is we want to preserve historic trees, the Loop, elsewhere, if the goal is to preserve some historic trees, what do we need to say or do that doesn't get into this mess? I agree with Jessica, just from what I know about trying to get a good accounting and mapping of county conservation lands and who owns them or what has easements and all of that. So I completely agree with you. But how do we fulfill what the goal is, which would be on our beautiful roadways to save those historic trees? I don't know what that language is, but I think that's what we're getting down to.
If we strike the word local, couldn't internally the county choose to go beyond what's required? No, well, it seems like an internal organization issue. Is your leadership saying you need to adhere to we need to preserve trees? Okay, so I think I hear what Jessica's saying. We'll have this unintended consequence because we're trying to force your team. You are you. No,
we are not.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is we have to get the policymakers and the county manager on board to want to have trees in these right-of-ways in order, I think, for that type of enforcement anyways. So if we strike this language, could have that situation Jessica mentioned. If we leave it in, we still have opportunity to lobby the county to adhere to more stringent tree preservation requirements. No, he says no.
Well, no, you do have that opportunity.
You can lobby, but
It's
not going to listen.
Yeah, we could eliminate the addition of number 7. Number 7 doesn't exist except in this room, right? So if it's overly, we can take it out. And so,
Okay.
and we go back to where we are right now, which is state and federal road projects don't get tree permits.
Oh, my God. I'm trying to turn it off.
And
Okay, and Jessica.
the county attorney's position is that county projects only have to adhere to Chapter 50. Chapter 50 does not make mention of planned road projects. So if we take number 7 off the table completely, we're right where we are right now, which is a county road isn't getting a tree permit, a local, state road isn't getting a tree permit.
Okay.
That's where we would be right now.
Okay.
No different. Now, if this body thinks there needs to be additional protection of trees in rights of way, planned or existing, then maybe the thing to do is to say what you want to protect, and then we wordsmith how that actually works, right? Whether it's how it's written in 7, or you take out this word or whatever, we work with the county attorney's office and say, if you say we want to protect historic trees on all rights of way, then we figure out how to say that.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And bring it
Je-
back.
Jessica?
Yeah, I would say, I think that's what I'm trying to think of a savings clause, in that there are a lot of county projects that have been planned and approved for decades. We know that. They sit on the shelf until they're ready. If we wanted to say something like new roadway alignments shall minimize impacts to historic trees to the fullest extent possible, or something like that, so that when we're moving forward on planning, we have a policy. It doesn't have much teeth, but it has some to say, when you're planning that alignment and we have our public meetings on the comp plan amendment to show it, you say, no, your code says you're supposed to avoid historic trees, route it this way instead, or do this as an alternative.
I think that sounds reasonable. Sarah Lee?
I want to withdraw my motion.
Okay, withdrawn. Jack? Oh, I'm sorry. Can you do, you have to second the withdrawal? Oh, okay, I was gonna
There
say.
is a second, so doesn't the second have to agree to the withdrawal?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. Jack?
Yeah, I think we need to rework the language. I think we need to go back to the drawing board here and have a conversation with the, with your folks internally, and because I think we need a general principle more than a very specific rule, and then we apply that as best we can, and we'll get the best results versus creating more of an encumbering circumstance that no one's gonna appreciate. So
Okay,
I think that's the way to do it. My motion, if there needs a motion, is that we go back and look at the language and rework it on a county level.
Okay, I think they may still need more direction than that, but I'm gonna go right down the line. Bob?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from Clay, since this was not your amendment, before I vote on that. I'd
Okay.
like to really hear more of the
Understood.
reasoning.
And I think that's what Jack's saying too. We need a little more time. Alex? I hear some agreement. All right, Tyler?
It's not usually an effective method. Square tract of land and not laid in somewhere. Then we have some flexibility. Yes, that if we go back to what was struck on the prior page, the section B, and we read planned public or private right-of-ways, neither of those really addresses the distinction between publicly developed private right-of-ways and privately developed public right-of-ways.
Okay.
So when we dedicate roads to the city or county, they become public right-of-ways. And that's the loophole that they're trying to get out, is that as a developer,
Okay.
they try to argue that I don't
I
have
see.
to replace the trees or something. But I think we should still protect our public projects and not come up with these snaking requirements. When you make a highway curvilinear all over the place, it doesn't operate as safely. When people go out in the woods and we have just health issues that come out of that. I mean, there's a lot of work we put into making our roads operate safely. And if I have to start dodging trees,
Okay, all right. Ginger, do you have enough to rework and propose something different based on the comments you're hearing?
Yeah, I think so, and I think to Tyler's point, when when we get into this, what's required in a subdivision, we could address that.
Okay,
in the
All right.
subdivision requirements.
so it is tabled. I have to put in a plug because FDOT with its safety that curving roads is actually supposed to be like traffic calming and safer. It makes people slow down. But anyhow, okay, moving on. Let's see, we have 9 minutes. Let's see how far we get. Land management activities. Trees removed by or for government in conjunction with land management activities on publicly owned conservation land are exempt from the provisions. However, trees removed for construction or installation of buildings, hardscape, or related infrastructure are not exempt. Can I have a
Move to approve.
Jessica makes a motion. Anyone want to second that?
I'll second.
Bill seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. See, we did do it. All right. Should we do one more? Okay, state and federal land. All protected trees on state and federal land are exempt from this division. Do I have a motion? Tyler makes a motion. Do I have a second? Second from, who said that? Jessica, all those in favor, any comments? Oh, yes, Sarah Lee?
Just, all these exemptions, and I understand the basis for it. There was a time where I represented the school district, and it is a state agency. And I was fortunate because the people I worked with at the county during the time always worked with me on the issues we had with regard to both tree protection and preservation and replacement. But, we're spelling out exemption after exemption after exemption. And I think it's a little bit of a gray area when it comes to the district. I'm not speaking on behalf of the district, but I know that there are school districts across the state that get into it big time with their local governments over these issues. And it does concern me a little bit that we spell out these exemptions for different types of activities, projects, and government entities. And I think there's a little bit of a gray area.
Is your
when it comes
concern
to
that,
the district.
that it would include public school systems? Is that your concern?
My concern is that if I was still with the district,
Yes.
I would take the position that we are exempt. And I did take that position because of
Okay.
other state legislation that speaks to it. I'm not sure that sometimes you might want to do this on a case-by-case basis and not protect it by right in an
Okay.
ordinance.
Understood.
And so I'm
Bill?
just bringing it up. I don't have a dog in this fight anymore on that issue, but I know it exists.
Okay. Bill?
That is true. So currently, school boards or any state, it could be a DEP office or anybody like that, doesn't have ordinance?
That's a question?
Well,
That's a
currently,
question.
they're not technically exempt, but we don't permit those.
So this is just to kind of codify that.
They exist.
Yeah,
how you're
the
Yeah.
school board right now does not come to us for a tree permit on a school project.
Anyways,
That may
okay.
be right now, but it's not always been.
Well, they're.
They may work with you and then not get a permit. Do they work with you?
No.
Okay, I don't want to hear
Okay.
more about
All
that.
right. I'm gonna, let me allow Wendy to speak.
But what I guess, and I'm really going back in my career, when we had the General Mail facility in Daytona, and they claimed exemption because they were state agency. And at that time I worked for Daytona. They at least had to come to us, and it was more of a negotiation. Okay. And you as the government don't get everything you want, but they as an agency also don't get everything they wanted because there was nothing exempting them, right? So I'm not sure that I agree that state and federal land need, I'm not saying they're not exempt, but I don't know that it needs to be in your ordinance.
Written in the ordinance. Okay, what?
That gets to the point point that Jessica made earlier, which is we don't necessarily have to say if we're preempted, we're preempted. And then we can have that discussion. with that
Okay.
You put the burden on the applicant to prove they're exempt.
Yep.
You know, let them show you the statute and or the rule.
Okay, I want to allow Wendy to speak, please.
I was just gonna highlight the fact that the language here is explicitly about land management activities. And so what counts as land? Oh, wait, sorry,
Number 9?
Okay, so you have no comment then, Wendy?
I'm sorry.
Okay, Tyler, did you have a comment? Because there is a motion on the floor. No, okay. So the motion was to approve this exemption. So I'm going to go ahead and call a vote. All those in favor, say aye. Any, talking number 9. Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. All right.
Wait.
What?
Fail.
Fails. But I'm sorry. Y'all, I'm sorry. Fails.
I think his was above that, but whatever.
You're
it is.
removing that exemption,
Sarah
correct?
made the point.
Okay, here. Oh, we got 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Jack?
I want to change the subject completely, but maybe that's good.
Out of order. Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead.
I would like to know more about the tree replacement fund. It's come up many times today, and I don't understand the details of that. And so if next time we could have a discussion where I better understand how it works, kind of what the, the funding average is on a year-to-year basis, some sort of idea about the fund itself.
Okay. Jessica? Oh, I'm sorry.
You mentioned it last time. I have how much we've taken in over the years, but if you want to have a larger discussion next time.
Yeah. Well, if you want to just send out info to us, I agree. I'd be curious. I probably could look on Muni Code. Jessica?
Quickly, I move to strike exemption 9.
Do we need it? Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Melissa seconds. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Oh, you oppose? You oppose? Oppose? Okay, all right. Bob opposes and motion carries. Okay, so Ginger, you want to have some final comments?
Just, next time, we'll just keep going from here and we'll talk about the tree fund. Anything else?
Tree fund and then
PowerPoint? Yeah. Yeah.
PowerPoint will go out.
If we just put it on the web, is that fine?
Yep. Wendy?
I would like to hear more about this assertion that the county does not have to follow Chapter 72, but only Chapter 50. I'd like to understand that better.
I find it bizarre, but Bill?
So we do projects where they do something like a sheriff's evidence or something, and they do apply the tree and the WAP and everything. So they do.
Who's they? Ginger and
county.
Keith applying?
Well, through the DRC process, somehow we're counting trees and we're given replacement areas in the area by Tiger Bay inside county property. So it's not always.
No, some divisions are very good and they follow all the rules and they do all the things. Some of them are not so good.
So we can have that discussion, and that is a county attorney office.
Sure.
Thing. Not Chris.
Not great. I have one more minute.
Not me, but I'll have
one-
discussions
okay.
with them and report back.
Okay, Alex, and then I want to make a comment. We'll adjourn. Go ahead, Alex. Like the Environmental Council Volusia Flagler meetings.
So the short answer is you cannot be discussing anything that could conceivably come before this board for discussion. I'm not sure how that plays into your question. We can always talk afterwards if you'd
Yeah,
like.
let's talk to him after. That's a good, we do need to clarify that. And my final comment, I'm bringing this up because I can't talk individually to you all. So I'll put it on the, are we all comfortable putting in all this work without knowing the new council's preference? And even that's to you, Ginger. Do you feel comfortable that we are working for a purpose here? I want to know we're working for a purpose.
So I don't know. I can't read their minds, and we don't know them well enough yet to know what their preferences are. My suggestion is for each of you to reach out to the member in the district that appointed you. So if your member is a new person, is to reach out to them, explain to them what you're doing, and get their take on it. Now, a lot of the county appointed committees are up for reappointment in March, and we have heard the council members saying that they want to appoint their own people to these boards. Now, this committee is not up for reappointment.
Okay.
But it may come up that, you know, hey, well, I'm new and I didn't appoint that member. I want to appoint a different member. So I would say that speak to
Reach
your,
out. Okay.
Speak to your person.
Okay.
But I haven't heard anything globally about we don't want to continue
Well,
or
and
any of that.
so my thinking is, and you know, I'm looking to you all for direction is, I think the group we have is a good blend. It's a, you know, it's a good mix. And we're making progress. I'd hate to see that derailed. Would it be appropriate for a representative of this group to make a public comment, just stating that we're having some success, that this is a good use of, you know, that this is a public time, that we encourage them to retain the composition as it is? Do you think that's necessary, or we just see what happens?
I happened to be with my council representative the other day, and I happened to mention this committee and its work, and he did not express any concerns and said it was an important committee. I am more inclined, I mean, we were appointed for a 2-year term. I think we should just
Let it lie. Okay.
That is my opinion.
Okay. Well, let me hear from Melissa.
I tend to agree with Sarah Lee, but I also think that it was a wise idea that you brought up at the last meeting for us to touch base with our council people. I've had the person who appointed me is still on the council, but I'm not in his district. So I have had a brief conversation with my district rep about this work. And very tangentially, though, not purposefully. And I think it would be a good idea because they
To talk to your.
Yeah, why
for
we
sure
did this
Everyone should
and-
do that, for sure. Bill?
So just procedurally, we are going to recommend changes, vote on these changes, and then staff will take these changes to the county council to get them approved. Is that the way it's going to happen? So then it really, we just carry
Just
on.
do our thing. Okay.
Right.
Jack, did you have a comment?
Only that I don't want to waste my time if we're going to give it to them and they say, well, we don't care about it. But I hear you, and I think the comments from us directly, I guess, is the way to go. Frankly, I don't think any of the county council is going to take a position or have the will to take the position that we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. But I kind of would like the support, just as you say, to make sure that in fact they're
Yeah. And I
on
don't
board.
anticipate any disbandment either. And I've talked to my representative and they're behind it. It was more just, you know, for us to have that assurance. But if you all are comfortable, I just want to put that out there as a thought in my mind. And Melissa?
One of the talking points kind of for when you do talk to your new rep that I think is important, bring them back to why this was decided upon. Presumably, we're all very well aware of why this committee was constituted and the composition of it, about how important it was to have a broad membership in terms of discipline and background, and that we are having very vigorous discussions where we're representing all kinds of different viewpoints. So they understand that we're not just, it gets back to us being political appointees. So they understand that we're not just here fulfilling some person's agenda. We're fulfilling the intent of this committee. Go sell it, folks.
Yeah, and I would emphasize the composition, I think, is where I thought we have a good composition. But all right, we'll take it as it is, and the meeting is adjourned, 4:05.
Next meeting is March 1st.